Friday live stream. It's been a funny week, as some of you may know, and thank you very much indeed. Some of you who have posted some very nice messages, sent me some very nice messages. My mum's stable, not much change, and I'll be seeing her again. Well, seeing her tonight and tomorrow and the weekend. But yeah, she's had a great life. That's the best way of looking at it, I think, and she's in peace now, very peacefully. In her home, her care home. And anyway, I won't go on about it. Thank you so much, everybody, for caring. But I wanted to do this live stream just before the weekend gathered pace and to get into motor racing again. And there's lots going on, actually. I couldn't believe it, waking up this morning to the news that Gazoo Toyota Racing are doing an association with Haas Ferrari, who are currently with Dallara as well. So there's quite a big alphabet soup there, isn't there? I'm not sure the Dallara link will now continue for very long. I'm sure it'll have to in the short term, but I think I can see through my crystal ball, maybe wrong, Toyota getting involved on the manufacturing side through their Cologne area, which is really good. I mean, it's a really good facility there still, and basically playing the role that Dallara play, and then simultaneously developing an engine for 26. I'm sure that will be, or beyond, beyond 26 maybe, but that'll be the plan. So that'll be, welcome back to Formula One, I think you got to say to Toyota, Gazoo Racing. And I think we can say it's a very nice job done by Teo Komatsu, the new team principal of Haas Ferrari, who's not only had a great season so far, consistently quick, those two cars, considering they're punching well above their weight, and but now has pulled off a great deal. And I can imagine Stefano Domenicali and the FIA all saying, wow, isn't this great? We've got AO now really trying to get Toyota back into Formula One. They're not back into Formula One as a team, obviously, but to do it this way, softly with Haas and with Komatsu-san obviously making a nice home for Toyota engineers, Toyota mechanics, Toyota personnel, logistics personnel, getting a lot of Toyota people over there, obviously a young driver program as well. It augurs very well for the future in terms of Toyota being in Formula One. One question mark I have, of course, is the link with Toyota that McLaren have been pursuing, and I've got a look here, Ryo Hirakawa, who won the 22 Le Mans 24 Hours, quick driver, a Toyota driver, was announced as a McLaren 2024 reserve Formula One driver at the start of this year, doing a lot of sim work and other work. And I always imagined putting two and two together, kind of, and hopefully getting a result, that this was Zach's way of basically just sort of thinking of the future, and maybe if we can get Toyota on board and they're going to do an engine, we'll be in prime position to have that Toyota engine at McLaren. I think that's what it was all about. If it wasn't, I don't know what else it would have been all about, let's put it that way. And now we've got this deal with, and I don't think this deal would have happened, got to say, if Gunther Steiner was still there. But now it's a completely new Haas Ferrari setup, and we've got this very logical, hard-working, uncluttered, very cool race team principal, Teo Komatsu, obviously reaching out to Toyota in Japan and finding a bond there that's worked really well, and it's very impressive to see how he's working and what he's putting together, because he's not just running the team as a team principal, he's actually going out there and putting deals together. Now, a lot of Formula One teams probably would say, well, they'd be probably ham-fisted with Toyota and say, well, we want an engine, or we want this, or we want that. But he's going in there and he's just saying, right, let's just start with personnel interchange, young driver program, and behind the scenes, I think, take over from Dallara and let's manufacture some parts. Although, as I say, I think it'll be a fairly, Dallara will be phased out relatively slowly as distinct from overnight. But not many other teams would have done that. I think they would go in and demanding more, and he's done it in a really good way. I don't know. I think that Toyota would want to bring up their own young guys and have them potentially in the car one day, and do it that way. Now, it may well be they'll go with Yuki in a year, for 26. Who knows how that will go. It's also interesting, isn't it, that his Haas right now, in the Formula One era in which we live, in which basically Formula One teams have to design and build their own car. I know that obviously they have customer engines, and we have more than just engines now. We have powertrain technology and other technology as well, even aero and suspension technology interchange. But basically the teams must design and build their own cars. That's what makes Formula One different from any other form of motorsport in the world. You've got to enter the World Championship, you've got to build your own car. And yet his Haas now, actually, with Dallara building the chassis, Toyota bringing lots of stuff now, bits and bobs, and potentially doing the chassis, the bulk of the chassis. And they're already saying small aero parts as well. And Ferrari doing the engine and gearbox. So, basically, they should be doing a good job because they're just a race team running the race. They just, let everybody else get on with all the design and construction, which is nirvana really in many ways for a race team, isn't it? So, but as I said, I've said this in a couple of live streams. Nobody seems to be concerned about that, and they just let him get on with it. I'm surprised really because, if you are going to be as strict as they try to be on budget cap and all these other controls in Formula One, you would imagine they'd be fairly strict on this whole business of associating yourself with a variety of different manufacturers for the building of the car and the design of the car for that matter. Anyway, there's that. And then there's also Esteban Ocon, who suddenly, I don't know whether he knew about all this, probably he did. I mean, suddenly his move to Haas Ferrari looks pretty good, I think. And a lot of people have been saying, Ocon always crashes into Gasly and, blah, blah, blah. I actually rate Esteban Ocon very highly. I think he's very good, and I think he's actually very bright. And I can't imagine he would be in that car for 25 and potentially 26 unless Komatsu specifically wanted him and really believes in him and likes the way he thinks and works. Because I think a lot of people say, oh no, his days are numbered, he'll be out after a year, they'll get somebody, Japanese, whatever, Yuki maybe. But obviously if he doesn't deliver in 25, it's another matter. But assuming Ocon does what he does pretty well, then I think it's not such an open and shut case. I think, he is there because he's studious and he does get on with it. So from his point of view, he's left Alpine, which at the time looked pretty bad. He's getting sacked by Alpine, it looked like. But now he's going to this mega team, and it's, I say mega team, it's not looking too bad. And a lot of people might be thinking, wow, it's not a bad drive, that one. And Ollie Byrne too must be thinking, yes, this is very good. Very good. 1 minute I'm, on the edge. Next minute I'm driving a Haas Ferrari, Dallara Toyota, mega. So yeah, good for them, good for all of them. And congratulations to Komatsu and the boys for pulling all that off, because no mean feat really, quite difficult to do. And for Toyota, for getting in this way too, I think it makes a lot of sense. They love the Japanese. I mean, when I was at Williams, we had the Honda link. Honda loved to bring engineers over, quite much to Patrick's irritation, because you get to know them all and get to know their names, and some of them obviously be trained up, and then 9 months later they'd be gone, and then a whole new batch would arrive. That was the irritating bit, and it'll be the same now, I suspect. They just see it as a fast track way of learning high tech engineering, and they've got this great facility in Cologne. Use a bit more of it. The rally cars are going well. We've got the Japanese rally coming up soon, so that's good. And so yeah, I think it's quite an interesting development, that one. So with no more ado, we'll start going through some questions. Again, I'll try and do this a longer live stream now. I'm kind of ready for it and prepared for it, so hopefully I'll get through most of the questions. So first question is from Sujith. Hi Peter, I like it you're enjoying the World Rally Championship. Now I'm getting into World Endurance Championship. This sport is in its second golden age. The LMH cars, especially the Ferrari 499P and the Toyota GR010, are a high-tech piece of kit. Yeah, just on that point, actually, the Ferrari, of course, is a Dallara. Speaking of Dallara and Haas and everything else. And I heard a story the other day that it was basically designed by Aldo Costa. And he sort of basically drew it. And then Ferrari went away and did their own mods. And then he was very pedantic about ensuring that they stuck with his Aldo Costa's structural numbers and absolutely met the stiffness that he wanted in order to have the engine mounted as a stress member, and was really emphatic about that. It meant Ferrari had to spend a lot more money as a result. But it is a great tribute, I think, to Aldo Costa and Dallara, that Ferrari car. And Sujith goes on to say, next year, Aston Martin bringing the Valkyrie. Hyundai have confirmed their entry with the Genesis brand, but under the LMDH class, where they'll have a Dallara chassis and spec gearboxes hybrid motor. Yeah, well, good luck to them. I think you'd be pretty crazy not to go for a Dallara chassis at the moment. Work with Aldo Costa. I mean, he's there at Dallara. Why not use him? One of the best chassis designers in the business, in my opinion, and he's at Dallara in the Haas car. So from Haas's point of view, they obviously led the design on that, and that'll be, you know, quite a seamless thing if they want to take it to Cologne, I believe, to Toyota. AB says, greetings from India, Peter. Hope your mum is good. Thank you very much. Best wishes to her. Peter, Gunther Steiner said, if Charlie was in charge, Lewis would have been an 8-time world champion. Your views on the most shameful night in any sport? Yeah, no, he's absolutely right about that, old Gunther. Well, yeah, no, Charlie is absolutely right. There was a lot of Jonathan Wheatley in the ear of Michael Massey at Abu Dhabi, and he was doing a better job than anybody at Mercedes at the time. I mean, Ron Meadows is brilliant, but he's a nice guy. You know, he's not going to get in a shouting match, I don't think. So that was what that was all about, and you know, you got to say, I mean, that they got away with it. So you got to say, from Jonathan Wheatley's point of view, an amazing piece of opportunism to see, yeah, we've got the tyre change, let's do it, you know, start the race. And they just saw that glimmer and just pushed Massey into doing it. But Massey should never have given into that and should never have done it. Massive mistake by him at the worst possible moment. And of course, he's paying the price because he's, you know, no longer there. And I don't think Charlie, no, there's no way Charlie would have been influenced by that. And Charlie would have finished that race under a safety car for sure. And as I say, that would have been no bad thing. I mean, all this stuff about, oh, you know, race to the finish, sprint to the finish. Well, it wasn't a race, it wasn't a sprint. I mean, one guy was on new tyres, the other guy was on old tyres. Give me a break. Soft tyres versus mediums. So that was never going to be, that was not a sprint race to the finish at all. And had Lewis just led the field round on that last lap to the checkered flag behind the safety car, it's not the first time that's happened, not the last time it will happen either. And it would have been an amazingly emotional moment, the way Abu Dhabi does it with the fireworks and everything else under the night and the stars. So yeah, that moment was lost. We never had it. And I think Mercedes gave up much too soon over the winter in terms of, oh, well, you know, water under the bridge, move on. I don't think they did anything like enough. That should have gone much higher and further. And in the same way that you don't win or lose a championship in one race, you don't give up because of one race either. And it all adds up. The points all add up. But ultimately, in that specific race, a massive mistake was made, and there was no repercussion from that. Really, nothing at all. And as it turned out, you know, Max has got his championships anyway. And if we were sitting here now and Lewis had won that 8th championship, I don't think Max would be saying, I was robbed. He'd be relaxed and cool as he is. He'd be thinking about, what am I going to do in 26 and beyond, as he is. AB continues, over the top. Peter, thanks for being the best Formula 1 pundit in the world. Wish you good health and typical Aussies. Cricket question for you. Ponting or Steve Waugh? Better batsman, better captain? I think Ponting was the more elegant batsman. I think Steve Waugh was incredible, particularly on the offside, I think, under pressure and just getting the shot that he needed to get in order to do what had to be done. Whereas Ricky was a little bit more stylized, particularly his pull shot, obviously, his famous pull shot. Better captain? Oof. I got to say Steve Waugh. I think Steve Waugh could actually have been Prime Minister, or could still be Prime Minister of Australia and do a very good job. He's a leader of men. He doesn't say much, but you don't need to when you're a true leader. And yeah, I would still say Steve. Well, I think Ponting Ricky Ponting is what he is and was what he was because of Steve Waugh anyway. So it's a little bit, difficult one. BNNT says, hi Peter, just dropping in to thank you for the time you spend with the community and hope everything's right with your mum. Oh, thank you very much. It's very nice. Well, it's always nice to spend time with the community. This is my lifeblood now, just getting back into what people are thinking and saying and talking about all the things hopefully we all enjoy talking about. You know, there's so many aspects of motor racing that we very rarely mention or talk about or delve into because they've been swept under the carpet as being unimportant or too old or this or that. But yeah, for me, Teo Neuville is just as important as Isaac Hadjar. You know, they're both great racing drivers. We don't know how great Isaac's going to be or Isaac's going to be, but all I'm saying is they're all young kids, and when Neuville was racing, the world wasn't black and white, it was colour. And it was just the same as it is today, except that he drove different sorts of cars, obviously. So I'm going... I've got a slightly different script thing, chat thing going on today, as you can see. We did this question last time, but if you weren't there, it'd be wrong for me to say I've already answered that, because that's not what this live stream's all about. Maybe you weren't there. But hi, Peter, what are your thoughts on Tommy Byrne? He seems to be Formula One's biggest wasted talent. As quick as Senna in junior classes, but his abrasive personality. Without Senna's, millions cut him off from Formula One. Yeah, well, as I said, you know, I knew Tommy. The Tommy I knew, which was when he was racing Formula 3, and I was living in London, and he was living nearby, and we played squash together and went running together and did a lot of stuff together. Was not abrasive. He's a lovely guy, very sweet guy, over from Ireland, and I always rated him incredibly highly. Yeah, I saw him as a very, very polished driver, a slightly more polished version of Johnny Dumfries, who was incredibly quick as well, up there with Martin Brundle in terms of Formula 3, and Nigel, really, I guess, and yeah, and quite short corners too, even at that early stage. He was really good, but it all went wrong when, for some reason, which Tommy could never understand. I remember having lunch with Tommy in a pub sort of 2 days after he did his McLaren F1 test. He was saying, I just can't understand it. You know, from the minute I got there, it was as if Tyler Alexander did not want this test to happen, and he certainly didn't want me in the car. And everything I said, this is Tommy talking, everything I said, Tyler just basically said no. and he said, I just never had a chance. And I think at that moment, things changed for him, and he probably became quite, you know, a different person, and felt that he'd been badly treated. And I think he has been. I think he was actually at the time. I don't think it was a proper test, and I think he would have gone very well had he been given a proper opportunity. But you know, he's a funny guy, nice guy. I'm not massively into all the swearing and all the rest of it, but that's not the Tommy that I knew. Tommy that I knew in London was a really cool, sweet guy. Probably is still now. I mean, he probably just has this sort of persona out there, but I'm sure he's the same guy. And if you're watching or hearing about this, Tommy, all the best to you, mate. I am Tim says, hi, Peter. Just wanted to say thank you for doing these and your tireless efforts in keeping history alive for everyone. Thank you very much. You make it sound like some sort of task or something. It's not. You know, I was going through one of my big boxes of pictures the other day, and just every time I open it, I go to, oh, that's interesting, and I think about that and look at this. Oh, I didn't realise that. Yeah, I've got so many pictures, so many books. I suppose that's what happens. You know, you do it for long enough, and all this stuff accumulates. But it all seems like yesterday, really. I just think, well, why did they do that? Why didn't they do this? You know. But anyway, thank you very much. Anyway, another question from I'm Tim. How big is the Toyota news? Do you think it would develop into a full return in time? Yeah, I do. I think this is. I mean, if you look at the Akeo Toyotas, who is the president of Toyota Motor Corporation, I mean, a pretty serious player, but he also loves racing, and he's raced himself, and he's given us the Yaris GR and great road cars like that. You know, if you've got somebody like that at the helm of a company, yeah, of course he's going to bring it back as best he can. And I think he's kind of realised what a good job Komatsu-san is doing at Haas. And I would, you know, they'll be on the phone quite a lot, I would imagine, between now and the future, saying, how should we do this? Let's see how it goes. Yeah, take it easy, step by step, in true Japanese tradition. And I think I say true Japanese tradition. I hadn't realised that before the 68 French Grand Prix, I'm talking Honda now, not Toyota, you'll recall that they did that V8 air-cooled car, the 308 RA3081, I think it was called, something like that. And John Surtees tested it at Suzuka, interestingly, and said it was pretty undrivable because of its very low polar moment of inertia, and it was very twitchy, very difficult to drive. Mainly that. I mean, mechanically it wasn't bad, but it was just a very, very unbalanced, difficult car to drive and needed a lot of development before he would want to race it. And then it was at Slough where the Surtees racing operation was based. The Lola operation was based at that point, Surtees Lola, and he'd done that car obviously for the '67 Italian Grand Prix and won it. It was the adapted Lola, and this air-cooled car was there, and Surtees said, "I don't want to race it." And apparently, the week before the French Grand Prix, the Honda transporter arrived at the dead of night without Surtees' knowledge, and put the air-cooled car in the back of the transporter and drove it to France for the French Grand Prix. And Surtees arrived next morning, no Honda air-cooled car there, and he said, "Oh yeah, it's in France. We're going to race it with Joe Schlesser." Surtees couldn't believe it. I didn't know that they did that without Surtees' knowledge even. I just assumed he said, "Well, I don't think we should race it, but if, go ahead." They just took the car away from him and took it to France. And of course, Schlesser was killed on the second lap, I think. Lost control down through the sweepers, the fast sweepers, and the magnesium chassis just was a fireball, and that was it. So yeah, that was under the context the Japanese always do things in correct stages, and they learn too, obviously, very quickly. And certainly, in my experience with Honda at Williams, everything was very organogram, very, very detailed, and it'll be the same way now. Analysis of data, analysis of learning processes, analysis of logistics, and predictions of dynamics, and all this stuff. It'll be done in probably better than any team or company's ever done it before, knowing Toyota. So it is big, I think, and I think they will be thinking engine. Probably too late to be thinking 26, but I think beyond, that would be the hope. That would be the hope for Komatsu. That'll have a Toyota engine in the back at some point. And I guess Zach Brown, who's got his links with Toyota as well, will be thinking it's not a bad thing because we'll see how the engine goes, and if it's any good, then we'll take it. Until then, we'll run the Mercedes. That's probably what he'll be thinking now. So there we go. Stephen Dobbins. Hi, Peter. Hope your mum's well. Yeah, well, she's not conscious. Got to, make that clear. She's just lying comfortably in bed, and it's a matter of time. Love your streams, analysis, and amazing powers of recall. Well, some days. Do you think Red Bull will slip to third in the Constructors' World Championship, may even prefer the extra wind tunnel time? The last point, the extra wind tunnel time. This is all under the heading of the cost cap and the agreements, and obviously also making things a little bit, they think, fairer by giving the first two teams, a penalty for being successful by having less wind tunnel testing time for the following season. I don't think anybody at Red Bull is thinking that, no. I think everybody at Red Bull is thinking we want to win this championship. We've got to win this championship. I don't think they're thinking constructors or drivers. They're just thinking we've got to do the best job we can in every race. We'll leave it to Max how he runs the races, but we've got to do the best job we can. And racing's it's complicated enough without complicating it more, without thinking of the convolutions of points and where would be good to finish or not finish. Having said that, if they don't win the Constructors' Championship and they do win the Drivers' Championship, that's not a bad result in terms of wind tunnel time for next year. So, yeah, we'll see. I think Red Bull will win a race for the end of the year, is my prediction. Famous last words. I think they will. Well, they were second in the last race, so it's not that big a prediction, is it? Stephen Dobbins. Also, do you find it fascinating? Sorry, same Stephen. Do you find it fascinating that in an industry sport that employs 10,000 plus of the planet's finest technical minds, that no one really understands the current tech regs, tyres, performance spikes? Well, I think McLaren. Well, I've always said, it's kind of difficult. Well, quoting Ron Torrent, it's difficult to know why you're quick. And if you actually said to McLaren now, if you actually sat down with, I don't know, whoever, Zach, let's say, and said, okay, you've cracked it now. You seem to be competitive every race. How have you done that? What specific thing if you had to name one thing that has accounted for your consistency from one race to another at this level, what is it? I'm not sure they would know. They'd say, well, we got a good balance and high grip level and good top speed. That's what, that's all you aim for. And reliability, of course. But what makes them more resilient to the spikes is still, I would say, an unanswered question even for McLaren. And yeah, you're right. Red Bull, we thought Red Bull had it sussed, didn't we? They don't really know. It's quite obvious now. Ferrari. But these teams aren't thinking that, are they? They're thinking, well, we've done it once, we can do it again. Let's keep going. Heads down, wind tunnel, CFD, save a bit more weight, new floor, upgrade. They don't have a big master plan of these are the inconsistencies we need to get out of the car. It's all just little things that they want to improve. And if that all adds up to a car having a bigger sweet spot that allows them to be more resilient to all the variables, then they've achieved something. But how you'd actually quantify that before you actually go into a sort of 5-race stretch would be very difficult. Got a super chat here, come in, thank you very much. Kevin Pryor. Hello Peter, who do you think will be Verstappen's teammate next season? Who will drive for VCARB next year? There's all sorts of rumours going on. Yeah, there seem to be all sorts of rumours going on. Helmut Marko's fueling a few of those by saying, well, it's all changed now. I'm fed up with all these old blokes. And you've got guys like Colapinto coming in and upstaging Alex Albon. We should be doing the same thing. And we've got a young guy in there, get rid of Perez or whatever he's saying. As I say, that's quite a big ask because Perez uniquely is still quite polished in doing what he does, and on a good day in a good car can still get a very good result, and along the way has a huge Mexican economy behind him, bringing a lot of money to the team. So if they got rid of him and they put a young guy in, that money would go, but then they would get maybe, a Franco Colapinto. But as I keep saying, it's one thing if you've got Alex Albon in the car and you've suddenly got a young gun in there running as quickly as Albon, or you've got maybe Oliver Byrne upstaging Esteban Ocon next year, good example. Or maybe even Antonelli once or twice out qualifying George Russell, perhaps. It's quite another when you've got Max Verstappen in the car. And whether or not Liam Lawson or Felipe Drugovich or Teo Pourchaire, to name just two recent Formula 2 champions, or some other young gun, is going to be a tenth, 2/10 a lap quicker than Sergio Perez, what difference does that make to the way Max Verstappen goes about running his World Championship challenge? It doesn't make a lot of difference because you've got Max Verstappen. If you've got Max, if you've got Lewis, I always used to say, and I think I would say if you got Charles, I think those three, it doesn't really matter what you got in the other car, providing you don't put Max alongside Lewis or vice versa. They're putting Lewis alongside Charles at Ferrari, but it's a slightly different situation there because it's run by Freddie Vasseur, who does a very good job of running Lewis Hamilton and has done in the past. And Lewis is at the back end of his career and knows what he's going into and knows that all he's got to do is upstage Charles a little bit to justify his existence and to really have fun, which I think he'll do from time to time at Ferrari. So it's not quite the same as just putting him in at Red Bull, for example. It'll be a much better managed situation. And Charles, I think, will be much better, much more, protected's the wrong word, but Charles will be better positioned to drive alongside Lewis than either, certainly more than Max would, let's put it that way. So where am I at? What I'm saying is that it's all very well for Helmut Marko and others to say, we've got to get the next generation coming along. But you've got to look at the specific teams in which you're saying that, about which you're saying that. And if at Red Bull, in my opinion, they don't actually need to replace Sergio Perez because they've got Max Verstappen. Of course, you could say, well, Max isn't going to be there forever and they have to have a young guy coming up. They've got to train him and get him ready. Well, they've got that. It's called the VCARB team. And that's what that team does. Good luck to Red Bull that they created that, kind of created it. They did it just to give Scott Speed a drive, didn't they, basically? But they've still got it for their sins, and as much as they'd probably like to sell it, or pass it on to somebody for a lot of money. Pass the franchise on anyway. And and therefore they can train their young drivers there. The mistake was to run Daniel Ricciardo this year. Why did they wasted time with that? Because Daniel was never going to go anywhere, I don't think. That's how it looked to me. And what were they hoping to achieve with Daniel there? They had Yuki Tsunoda there, pretty experienced by then. They should have been running Liam Lawson from the start of the year if he's the guy they choose. Isaac Hadjar, if they'd run Liam, they could have Liam in that car alongside Isaac Hadjar now, maybe. So they've lost a little bit of time, I think, with the Daniel Ricciardo decision, but then they'll make up for it for sure. But I do think there's a lot of knee-jerk, unjustified talk about who is the driver of the moment and who is the driver that is the next megastar. And that's because most of the Formula One adjudicators sit on the pit wall or in the garage or stand in the garage and don't actually get out there and watch the drivers doing what they do around corners, the way they use the steering and the throttle, and listen. And they just base their judgments on, what do they base it on? Handshakes, obviously results and stats, possibly the bank balance of the father, if it's a feeder formula driver. Well, probably, actually, not possibly, probably, almost certainly. And I don't know, strength of handshake, coolness of looks and attire, all that unimportant stuff becomes the judging factor. And they don't go out there and look at young drivers, and that's simple. And we see it time and again. Alex Albon's a good example in a way, isn't it? Because Red Bull had him, then they let him go, then they got him back again. Make up your mind, believe in this guy or not. And it's not difficult to see what the technique of drivers is and to evaluate that technique in a very sophisticated way. But they don't seem to do that. They do it on all these other quite ethereal factors and that's why we have so much confusion about this. That's why so many people are surprised by Franco Colapinto, because they obviously weren't out there watching him when he was doing his stuff in Formula 4 and all the other feeder categories. And now all of a sudden he's arrived and he hasn't won an F2 championship or something. And they're thinking, wow, it's amazing. You just jump in and go so quickly. But, they should have been out there watching. I'm not saying here that I watched Franco Colapinto, because there's so many young guys that I didn't, and I kick myself now because I know his manager very well, and I should have been spending more time. And it's not enough time in the day, really, is there, to look at all the branches of motorsport and all the young drivers. But if you're a Formula One team and you've got a dedicated group of people, you should be doing that. And if you're a team principal, you should be looking at young drivers out on the racetrack, as Franz Tost quite often used to do. Don't see many others doing that these days. So, again, I think if you said to Helmut Marko, what do you think about the style differences between Kimi Antonelli and Liam Lawson? He would talk about aggression on the first lap, or the way they look after tyres when they're starting to go off, and the way they use their brain in racecraft. He wouldn't talk about actual style inputs into the car. He wouldn't talk because he doesn't know. And that, why not? Because he's in the business. He's in that business. There must be enough tools now to be able to do that. So, I don't know. There are a lot of young guys out there, massively talented, some of whom are given the right opportunity at the right time, some of whom are not. And Felipe Drugovich is still a very good example, I think, of a guy. I mean, to some extent, he's his own worst enemy, because I don't know why he signed that Aston Martin deal when he did. I said at the time, I just can't see how this is going to advance his career at all. On the contrary, it's probably going to set him backwards. And I stand by that. I know he's driving the FP1 session in Mexico for Aston Martin, but so what? He's not going to be racing next year. And that's what we want. We want these young stars, and he is very talented, Drugovich, as is Teo Pourchaire. They need to be, as is Fred Vesti, they need to be out there racing. And Formula One's not doing enough. They've just cancelled the rookie race thing, which was always destined to be cancelled, as I said in the previous, I think the last live stream actually, because just doing a one-off in year-old cars run by the existing engineering and mechanic team of the current teams was never going to happen at end of a season like 2024. That sort of thing is only going to happen if you have a dedicated platform for these rookie races, if you like, and you have a 8-10 race series for these young drivers in the well-used Formula One cars run by dedicated teams and not the current existing teams. That needs to happen. Otherwise, we're always going to be losing good Formula One stars through standing around in the garage doing nothing or doing Formula E or sports cars. I say losing because they're not losing in the sense that Formula E or World Championship sports car racing isn't a great thing. They are very good categories, not decrying those at all. But it's Formula One's loss in some cases because these are young, talented guys that should be in Formula One. And it's not happening. So we'll see what happens in the future. But you're right, 10,000 plus people in Formula One. You'd think at least a proportion of that would be right on top of who's really good and who aren't. John MCF says, thoughts and prayers with you and your family. Thank you very much. Yeah, my mum. Uma Siddiqui, from your experience, how does this season compare to some of the most competitive ones in Formula One history? Well, I mean, you can look at that two ways, three ways probably, because some seasons apparently have been walkovers, but nonetheless had some great aspects to them. May not fall under the heading of being competitive, but were still wonderful to watch. I mean, if you take, for example, the 65 Belgian Grand Prix, run in pouring rain, Jim Clark easily wins it from Jackie Stewart. But the fascinating thing about that race was the way Jim Clark was concerned about Stewart, a rookie in the BRM, Jim's in the Lotus, in the rain at Spa, the heavy rain at Spa on the old circuit, and didn't want his buddy hurting himself. And Jackie was able to chime off Jim's lap times, and Jim drove at the pace that he felt was appropriate for Jackie Stewart. And to see that sort of synergy, that mental synergy, not that I was there, but I read about it and talked to Jackie about it, was just something that was gold. It was something you very rarely see that in a race. That wasn't competitive in the sense there were lots of overtakes, but it was an amazing race. Okay, that was one example. Another is a season where there are lots of different winners, which may not necessarily come under the heading of being competitive. I mean, if you take, for example, the 82 World Championship season, which Keke Rosberg won, but he only won one race. So you could argue, what an amazing year, all these different things going on. Of course, what happened was that we lost Gilles Villeneuve and we lost Didier Pironi, the two Ferrari drivers. And yeah, there were some great things in that season, but it wasn't competitive. But in terms of stats, you couldn't say it was boring, that's for sure. And then you have other seasons where you have amazing races. 2021, you got Max versus Lewis virtually from the get-go and right through to Michael Massey, and that's truly competitive racing. What we have this year is we have the second last year of a technical regulation that apparently nobody really understands and can get right, but some teams are more or less there and others are more or less not there, but sometimes there. And the midfield teams occasionally are really quick and sometimes unbelievably bad, all because of the technical misunderstanding of the technical regulations. And does that make a great Grand Prix season? You could argue it's great in the sense that we have, 6 races to go, 2 triple headers, would you believe? And we don't know who's going to win the Drivers' or the Constructors' Championship after this long grind already. So that's a good thing. On the other side of the coin, nobody seems to understand what's going on. There doesn't seem to be much logic to anything. All of a sudden, Red Bull are off the pace. McLaren are dominating everything. Ferrari suddenly reappear, then disappear. And Mercedes are kind of sometimes there or not. Logic has to come into it sometimes, doesn't it? You think, there's the Matra, there's Chris Amon in the Matra. Yeah, he's definitely a little bit slower in a straight line, but look how much quicker he is going into the Curva Grande or whatever. And there's Ronnie Peterson in the March against Francois Sever in the Tyrrell, and they've both got the same Cosworth engine, and it all makes sense, and you can see there's Sever against Ronnie Peterson. But here, it's like, is he in a tyre management mode? Is he in a lift and coast mode? Is he flat out? Is Max complaining about horrendous bouncing and oversteer that we can't see on camera at all? It's all a bit mystical, isn't it? And it's all a bit, to this season, more than any other, I think, in the history of the sport, is kind of wrapped up in the whole business of social media and social media persona and the Lando Norris that is out there on all those different social media platforms. And the Lando Norris racing driver who's getting trodden on a number of different ways, a number of different times, and not sticking up for himself in the way that, say, I don't know, Jackie Stewart would in that situation. So would have, and did indeed against Graham Hill. So yeah, it's a funny year, really. I think I kind of speak on behalf of most of the Formula One people when I say I can't wait for it to end, because, you know, finishing with 2 triple headers, it's exhausting, even if you're not at the racing, let alone at the racing. I can't imagine what those poor guys are going through, guys and girls. Yeah, there we go. Best to you and your family, says Frederick Thorne. Thank you very much. Shaq Marriott. Hi, Peter. Hope you're good. But how close do you think Antonelli is going to be to George? I think he'll be right there. How good do you think he is? And also Leclerc versus Lewis, who wins? Yeah, we were talking about that a little bit earlier. Yeah, Antonelli's very good. No doubt about that. Who's quicker, Antonelli or Ollie Byrne? That's quite a good question, isn't it? I think Ollie Byrne is not slow. Very different sort of driver. He's definitely takes a more open approach to the corners than Antonelli, who definitely likes to come in a little bit earlier, except when he's going into the parabolica and he's been purple on the first 2 sectors at Monza in FP1, end of brackets. So yeah, no, Antonelli's good. I would say he's Oscar Piastri good. And I think after that, sky's the limit, really, in terms of what he can achieve or not achieve. He's at Mercedes, factory team. It's interesting back-to-back, actually. Antonelli at Mercedes, Piastri at McLaren, Mercedes, because had Piastri stayed at Alpine, he'd probably be in the Mercedes now. So that's the car he could have been racing. And there's Antonelli in that car. And they're pretty similar, I think, in the way they drive. And they'll get, in terms of their ability to manage tyres and their ability to withstand the variables, they're pretty good. So it'd be interesting to see how those two compare over the next 4 or 5 years. But Antonelli's good. How will he go alongside George? Very good question. George, at the moment, I suspect, is a sort of slightly faster version of Ollie Byrne. And I think when the 2 Prema cars were more or less equal, I got the feeling Antonelli had the slight edge. Ollie would probably say, no, it's not right. But I think he did, given his inexperience and everything else, which you have to throw into it. Antonelli's good. And he's also very good at sort of planning the race and being there, isn't he? Doing what needs to be done. There were a few moments when he seemed to be a victim of more time mismanagement than others, I guess, in Formula 2. But, Formula 2 is very difficult to make judgment calls. There are so many other factors. It's such a weird formula, I think. And so how will he go against George? I think George will have certainly the qualifying edge first 2/3 of the year. Last third, he might have to struggle a bit more. And in the race, though, I think Antonelli can be pretty good. He will be pretty good. I think he'll be sort of as good as Franco's looked in the Williams alongside Alex Albon. I think Antonelli could look that good in the Mercedes alongside George. He's good. So, and what was the other part of that question? Let me just have a look. And who do you think? Leclerc versus Lewis, yeah. Who wins? Well, I think Leclerc over a season. If the Ferrari is a winning car, I think Leclerc will score more points than Lewis, because he knows the team, he knows the car, he knows the people, and he's young and he's hungry and he's Charles Leclerc. Lewis, I think, is going there in a very relaxed frame of mind, will really enjoy his driving at Ferrari, and he will be super, super quick. He'll be as good as Lewis can be, which is extremely good. And I think he will definitely out-qualify Charles. I mean, for sure he will, because there are always things in qualifying that you got to get perfect, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So Lewis will be right there, just as he's been there against George. And in the race, yeah, he could easily have a better strategy and do this and that and win some races. But as I say, if the car is a winning car, a car good enough to win consistently, like the McLaren next year, then I think Charles will have the slight racing edge over Lewis. I think. But all Lewis needs to do is out-qualify Charles 2 or 3 times in the first 6 races for Charles to be a bit unsettled and for the whole dynamic to change. Just kind of depends how the first 2 or 3 races go. And Lewis probably knows that. Lewis is just, he's a Rye House Street carter, isn't he? He knows that if he goes in, and he'll be saying, just take it easy, get to know the team, get to know the car, it's wonderful, he'll be doing all that stuff. But you can be sure that deep inside he'll be thinking, yeah, I've got to get this guy in the first couple of races just to show what I'm at, what I'm doing, what I'm going to be doing. So, yeah, good question. KMS Boss, Komatsu has been impressive as the new Haas team principal. Yeah, he has. I've been saying, I began the show with talking about Ao Komatsu and how well he's done. And the minute I heard he'd been appointed team principal, I think if you look back, I said this will be a major change for Haas and they will definitely improve as a result. And I think that's been the case. And I think, we have to give him credit for the decision to hire Ocon. Because I've got this feeling, like Komatsu, that Ocon is very good. Much better than he looked alongside Gasly. There was always going to be ending in tears to having 2 French drivers in the Alpine Formula 1 team. It was never going to work. And one of them was always going to look worse than another. And that's it. Polish Eddie says, hail, all hail King Windsor, Sir Peter for FIA President. Well, no, thank you, Polish. FIA President. Let's not go down that route. I think, there's quite a lot of talk about the FIA President at the moment. I don't know how many people have been watching the rallying recently. And this is a nice segue now, because I'm going to do this. It was astonishing to me, and I'm kind of refreshing myself with rallying again, having loved it for many years and then having spent so much time doing Formula One for so many years and now coming back and really taking an interest in rallying again. During the rally of Acropolis, to listen to Sébastien Ogier, who I always imagined to be this very dignified 8 times world champion, just a really cool guy, slagging off Thierry Neuville like there was no tomorrow. Neuville should stop moaning and learn how to drive the stages when he's cleaning the road and all this sort of stuff. Completely uncalled for, because all Thierry was doing was, quite correctly, when somebody asked him what it was like, he was saying, well, it was pretty terrible because I'm opening the stage and there's no grip at all. But he wasn't saying things have got to change. I'm going to talk about it to the FIA. But when Ogier had a problem, which I think was the first stage of the Acropolis, when he was following Neuville, or maybe he was going out P3, and there was a lot of dust, and he had been obviously saying prior to the event that they need to space out the cars more, and they didn't. And so he gets to the end of the stage and starts slagging off the FIA, which, 8 times world champion, imagine there's a better way of doing that. As a result of which he got reprimanded and fined, I think, by the FIA. And then he gets to the Rally of Chile, and his way of fighting back against that is when the interviews are supposed to happen at the end of the stage, he doesn't say anything, just keeps his mouth shut. Again, there's got to be a better way of fighting back than just not doing interviews and hurting the fans who are waiting to see what it's all about and trying to support rallying. I just found the whole thing totally bizarre. So in any event, there was that. So the FIA president is kind of involved in all of that, because that's flowed over from all what's happening in Formula One with the Max Verstappen swearing thing, and it was all happening at the same time. And I was asking some rallying people about what they think about the FIA president, the current one. And they said, well, if we ever saw him at a rally, we might be able to make a judgment call, rest their case. So there you go. Even though he's an ex-rally driver, apparently he hasn't done many rallies recently, which is not good, because WRC needs a big lift. And it's a great, great championship, a great, great sport. Anyway, that Rally of Chile was a difficult one for Thierry Neuville, because he's leading the Drivers' World Championship. Fabulous driver, as you know, and I did that stage with him in the shakedown stage with him in Finland. So I can say that with authority. This guy is seriously quick racing driver, let alone rally driver, and very talented driver. And he's leading the championship. But it's always difficult in rallying, because you've got all these other factors to do with reliability, which doesn't come quite so much into it in Formula One. It can be a puncture, it can be this, the weather, whatever. And so you're balancing all that against pace and still trying to be quick and to score as best as you can. Anyway, what impressed me about Chile, where he finished 4th, which is a good result really in terms of mitigating damage, and his teammate Otanak, who has a pretty good chance still of winning the championship, or a chance anyway, closed the gap a little bit, only finished third, but didn't win, which is the important thing, and got beaten by the two Toyota drivers, led by Calle Rovanperä, who's totally mega, and Elben Evans, who's also extremely good, funny guy. So Terry finished fourth, but what really impressed me is that he was quickest on special stage 11, which was this unbelievable stage up a mountain in which they then struck fog, and he was quicker than Rovanperä by 5 seconds, quicker than Tanak by 11 seconds. And I always remember Carlos Reutemann being super impressed by Walter Roll in the fog in the Rally of Portugal in 81, and couldn't believe how well Roll had driven in the fog and how difficult the fog is and how demanding. And that really is a decisive thing amongst drivers. How you drive in fog it was in Carlos's mind was one of the great things about rallying. And so when Terry got back from Chile, I spoke to him on Zoom about that and about the championship and a few other things. And I'd now like to, haven't done this before, run it before, but I'd now like to run that interview. It's about 20 minutes with Terry. And stay with it, because there's some great stuff about the fog. And he finishes talking about the upcoming Rally of Central Europe, which is taking place next weekend, same weekend as the US Grand Prix in Austin, which is tarmac roads in Czech Republic, Austria, Germany, mega rally as well. So that's going to be really good. So this was, bear in mind, I also asked him about the whole Ogier thing. And for the first time in my knowledge, Terry speaks about what Ogier has been saying about him and puts it all into logical context, as I knew he would. There's nothing sort of outbursts from Terry. It's all just explaining why he was always concerned about opening the stage and how different rallying is now compared to when Ogier used to open the stage, which is obviously a factor that Ogier never brought into it. So don't go away. Even if you haven't watched rallying before, or you don't really understand rallying, or you've never really taken an interest in it, this guy's super good. And he's talking about real things, all to do with driving, the art of driving, and particularly the art of driving in the fog. So enjoy my chat last week with Thierry Neuville.
Perfect. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks so much for doing this. I suspect you're still quite knackered from all the traveling. And how long have you been back in Europe, sort of in your own bed?
I came back like Tuesday evening. We had like a PR event with Hyundai friends on Wednesday, and yeah, and then basically the whole family was sick, and now I'm sick. So
You're sick?
yeah, but you'll be fine.
Flu.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Well, thank you so much for doing this. We'll keep it very short, as short as we can.
No
Terry, when
problem.
last we spoke, we were in Finland, and you were telling me
Yeah.
that I was saying, "Oh, the Acropolis, mega," and you said, "Oh, yeah, I'm mega, but things can happen there." I think it was a steering ball joint, something like that. But anyway, you did it perfectly, and you won it. And now,
Thank you.
very good points in Chile. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
My question to you is that very fine balancing act between pace and finishing and reliability, and how difficult that is under pressure as well. It's just brilliant how you've done that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's very challenging, of course, because we know that somehow we need to keep a close look on our main rivals, try to not be too far away on the Saturday evening standings, and give it an extra push on Sunday, because our main rivals will take more risks than us. But on the other hand, we know that finishing is crucial. And yeah, at the moment it's ours to lose, that's for sure. So we need to have the clever approach, which sometimes, it's a bit boring on the other hand, because obviously I know that somehow we cannot show the true potential, the true performance, but I would say it's all part of the game. With the gap we were able to pull out on the beginning of the season. Yeah, the end of the season is a bit more, like managing that gap.
I'm tempting fate here. Hopefully not. I'm touching wood. But I think it's fair to say, is it correct to say you haven't actually had a puncture since, well, you haven't had a puncture for a long time, right? And I'm wondering if that's an art and a skill, or do you just see that as pure luck?
No, generally throughout the season, we are very good on that side. I think it's not very often that we puncture throughout the season, but of course it happened, like it does for everybody. I think our last puncture actually was in Greece on the final stage, crossing the finish line like 1K before the finish.
Oh,
I
really?
got a front left puncture. But yeah, there was nothing to worry about. We were close to finish the stage and get that needed victory.
Terry, I know that the others always have explanations and excuses, if that's the right word. But Lota 2, special stage 11 on Chile, Terry Neuville, +5 on Rovanpera, +18 on Tanak, in the fog, very fast downhill section. That was just amazing to watch. Amazing.
Yeah. It was good. I mean, obviously, when the feeling is there and you have trust in your pace notes in those conditions, I knew that it was possible in the fog to make a gap or whatever to lose a lot of time because basically the fog, when it's a bit windy, is moving super quickly, and you can have the fog in the worst conditions as you can have free visibility in 85% of the stage, and you don't know. So it was crucial for us to keep a good rhythm, and yeah, obviously push a bit more than what we usually did. But I have to say we got through quite well. I don't
Oof.
know if we were more lucky than the others in terms of the weather conditions. But what's for sure, it's you never know, yeah, what have been the conditions for the others, and I didn't compare. So, but we got through quite well. I felt comfortable also in the fog, and I think we did what we had to do.
In the middle of the fog, and Martin is talking as normal, you suddenly say something which I can't quite hear what it is. Do you remember that moment? I think the word joli comes up and something like this is pretty or something like that, but I may be wrong.
Um, I don't remember now, to be honest. But for sure, we were talking about the condition. That's for sure. I at the end of the stage, I know we were talking and we said that actually it was quite enjoyable. Um, and obviously I was wearing these orange glasses, and they definitely give you, yeah, a bit of an advantage because the contrasts are better, and I'm sure it was helping me because at some point, I mean, in the middle of the stage, which hasn't been seen on the pictures yet, but we were driving like 40 or 50 kph in a section where we could drive 120. And I'm sure Martin could see absolutely nothing, where I was still able to at least see the edges of the road at some places. And that's why he was so impressed by that stage as well.
Well, he needs to get some orange lenses too, quite
Yeah,
obviously.
probably.
But it was interesting also at the end of the stage to hear Tanak saying that he was actually, there was some glare in the windscreen for him in the fog, and he was finding it very difficult because of that glare. And I wonder if that's something that's characteristic of all the Hyundais, but because of your orange lenses, it diffused that.
Generally, it was like little drops all the time, and
Mm.
it made it very, very challenging when it's very humid fog. In addition to, yeah, the bad visibility, your windscreen is constantly wet, and yeah, you don't see very clear. So for sure, that's an extra difficulty.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's what we have to deal
Yeah.
with.
On the recce, Terry, when you are in that on that stage, and it's a possibility of fog, presumably because of historical weather conditions. Do you actually think in terms of what are we going to do here if there is fog? And do you actually have pace notes
Yeah.
that reflect that?
Sure. In this rally, since our first experience, we have had heavy fog since Recce, and actually much less in 2019, much less during the rally itself. But we we took already any kind of distance between each corner because it's only the distance between the corners which can give you some kind of feedback where you actually are between those two corners. Where on rallies where we don't necessarily expect fog, we can have also different wordings which don't necessarily give us the distance, but exact distance, but radar, yeah, like is something a long distance is coming or radar a short distance, and so
Mm.
on. So we use those distances, basically, which are on the pace notes, but which are only used if it's fog. And if it's no fog, we use the OZO system, which basically makes it less complex and yeah, less information
Right.
to deal with in a good visibility situation.
So brilliant job by Martin then to keep up with all that. It must be
Yeah,
so, I
definitely.
cannot imagine how difficult that is.
Mm.
Terry, the championship now, obviously don't want to say it's all over by any means, but I guess you're looking forward to the next rally, right? And why do you like tarmac more than gravel, if I think I'm correct in saying that?
Obviously looking forward, of course, first of all, because this handicap by being first on the road on most of the gravel rallies on any wall doesn't exist. So firstly, we should have actually good conditions and maybe in like rainy conditions, even the best road position to deal with, and that's giving us the slight advantage. And then furthermore, I have gone on tarmac in the Belgian Championship. There's no gravel. I also always enjoyed driving on tarmac, the sensation you get from a proper racing car, and yeah, the adrenaline by going super fast, but knowing that the smallest mistakes can be crucial as well, makes it exciting, and it has always been super fun for me, and I have always felt very comfortable with that.
Speaking of the cleaning of the road, Ogier, for me, who spends most of my time in Formula One, he was surprisingly critical of you.
Maybe you should stop crying and learn driving fast on the road.
Complaining about having to clean the road. I guess that's an historical thing where at some point he had to do the same thing or whatever, and you made comments. I don't know, but what do you think about that with the dust settling now a little bit?
No, yeah, I think it's several factors which we have to take into account. Of course, he has been cleaning for a long time, and we have all been pushing already in that time to get back the qualification, which gives a better chance to everybody. However, yeah, he has been complaining for a long time, and it was acceptable because, of course, you don't want to be the one who's punished all the time. However, I have been cleaning as well when I was fighting against him for many rallies in some of the seasons where I have been leading the championship for 4, 5, 6 rounds in a row, and I also knew that it was tough. However, this year we have a different kind of scenario where first of all, we have more part-time drivers and more competitive part-time drivers, starting from the back row on every single event, which obviously makes it for us even more challenging. Furthermore, we have the fact that we had 7 gravel rallies in a row, which isn't for long that it exists, and we have always had in the past years, when Ogier was still competing for a full championship, we have always had Rally Germany in the middle of those row of gravel rallies. So there was like 3 or 4 gravel rallies, a tarmac event, and another 3 or 4, which basically cut a little bit those disadvantage, as well as we had Rally GB at the end of the year, which has always been a wet gravel rally, and the disadvantage didn't exist. So we had those factors into account as well. We have to take that in Latvia this year, we had only single passes on first passes on the stages and no second pass, which made it even more challenging for me on a Friday. So obviously, of course, I was complaining definitely a lot. And a big difference as well is that in the past we have been driving on Michelin, where for now we are driving on Pirelli, and on the Michelin, only the few first cars were basically able to use soft compounds. Wherever from the 4th or 5th cars on, they had to use the hard compound. Otherwise, they wouldn't finish the loop, and that
So
made
it was
it for
less of a
them.
disadvantage, yeah.
There was less of a disadvantage because we could basically take that advantage from the soft tire by reducing the gap of the cleaning effect. And this isn't the case with the Pirelli because we are using soft tires in the morning, and we are even using soft tires for the afternoon loop. So that disadvantage, that advantage with the Michelin we had has completely gone. So it makes it a complete different situation. And knowing as well that for now, points are already given on Saturday, it gives you even less of a time to catch back step by step some positions. So it's a completely different scenario which we can't compare. But of course, the fact that I have been managing my advantage in the championship over the last few races, I haven't been very competitive in opening the road, that's for sure.
Well, given all of that, I'm amazed how restrained you were and how much self-control you had just to say no comment for the rally, which is obviously the right thing to do, but I mean, unbelievable, really.
Maybe you should stop crying and learn driving fast on the road.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, at that point it was out of context. It would have been, arguable if there was a context where it fits, but there wasn't, and so for me, there was nothing to comment on that.
And do you find Martin is a big help on things like that as well, in terms of you two just chatting in the car on the road sections and things like that, keeping calm?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I really like at him is that he let me do. He's in full trust, and he just gives a bit of advice about our targets for the event. He's very sensible on that, and always making sure that we follow our target, and that's perfectly matching with what I'm doing and what we need.
And just talking about the cleaning, you lost P3 in Chile, if that's the right word. Lost probably isn't the right word, but it was only 17 seconds in the end, which possibly is just the cleaning effect, right?
Yeah, partly. I mean, not only because we have been really struggling with the setup on the first day. I definitely made the wrong choice by choosing the same dampers as I have used for the last couple of gravel events, especially in Greece, Sardinia, and Portugal, which are hotter events where the ground is more hot, the grip basically is better. And so the damper I choose for wasn't right, and we didn't get it right until Saturday, where we switched to another set of dampers with a different set of springs, which made it better. Didn't make it great, to be honest, but it made it better. And I think if we had all those details together, we haven't been fast enough for sure, and we weren't in position anymore to fight really for podium position.
But given that Ott is now second in the championship, how much information do you have on what he's running and setup he has?
No, there's complete transparency, so there's no secrets. Whatever, we do not necessarily have the same feedbacks and likings, preferences. So some rallies we are running exactly the same. Whatever on some other events, we run different settings, and there's no secret. His has been best at some point, mine has been best on others, and at the end we of course exchange on our experiences and try to improve for the upcoming events.
Just a couple of quick questions, because I don't want to keep you any too longer, just a few minutes, Terry. One is, when you're driving a road car now, automatic, do you brake with the left or the right foot?
No, with the right foot.
Do you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm in a relaxed mode, and I'm not pushing it, so
Yeah, but if there was a drama and a dog suddenly ran out in front of you, which foot do you think reflex you would go with?
With the right one for sure. I mean, it's obviously in our rally car, and in any race cars, the brake pedal is aligned in front of the left foot. Whatever on a road car, it's not really in a good position to use the left foot.
Okay, second one, I was chatting to Stoffel van Dorn in Singapore, just walking along the pits with him, and your name came up because I mentioned I did the shakedown with you, and he said, "Oh wow, yeah, we grew up kind of together in motorsport in Belgium, and he went one way and I went the other." And I'm just wondering if, going right back to that moment when you decided not to be a race driver, but to be a rally driver? Was there a specific day, a specific moment, a specific thing?
Yeah, obviously, my parents didn't have the financial, foundings to make me run in karting, so I basically had to wait until I got some money myself to start in autocross and get the opportunity to start my rallying career. So there was basically no opportunity for me. However, quickly I have been taken into the RACB national team, so the Belgian Federation national team, which supported me to develop my rally career. And I remember very well Stoffel joining the national team the same year or the year after. He was still a young child. He was like 15 or 16-year-old maximum. And I remember still us being in the training camp in Oslo, and all bars and coffees were open from 21 only. So the only place we could go with him was the strip club, where he could enter at 17 or 18 already. So that was a super cool experience and still great memories.
Genesis hypercar, Thierry Neuville, 2026, 27. Spa, 24 hours, whatever. Be quite cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, for sure. But as long as I can stick to rallying, I will stick to rallying. It has plenty of advantages. So first of all, it's where I'm best in. My body isn't really made for hypercars in terms of weight. I would be too happy, and I would need to request a driver's minimum weight, such as Max Verstappen is trying to push at the moment. For sure, because otherwise I wouldn't be that competitive.
Brilliant, Terry. Thank you so much. If we can just finish with just some thoughts on Japan also. I'm interested to know how you think you might go against Toyota in Japan. Everybody says it's their home rally, but it's not far away from Korea either, actually.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're in a tricky situation where the manufacturer's championship is crucial for the team and the brand. And obviously I won't be fighting for that title in Japan, which basically means also that we need to get things done in Central European for the championship, for the drivers' championship. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be very amazed and very relaxed to take lots of risk in Japan, especially where Toyota again will be with a strong drivers lineup and will make our life difficult. So that's why Central European is a challenging event where hopefully our third car as well can go and catch a lot of points, where we can get things done for the drivers' championship, and I would be free to allow myself to get back in the usual rhythm and push as much as we can to save that second title. That would be the optimal situation. Even this isn't the case, and we can't get it done in Central European for whatever reason. We need to. It will be a fine line for the Japan rally.
Well, there's Thierry Neuville. Brilliant. And if you live in Austria, would you believe that prior to the Central European Rally next weekend, he's doing a very small rally in Austria this weekend as a sort of test? They're going to try some bits on the car. It's going to be the course car, but it'll be the proper WRC1 Hyundai. So if you're there, there'll be all the local Austrian stars, and suddenly Thierry Neuville will be there. I'm not quite sure where it is, but I'm sure if you're into rallying and you live in Austria, you can probably find out fairly quickly where that's going to be. I love that about rallying, that suddenly you find these mega stars in local villages doing these local events. He was in Granada quite recently in Spain doing one here just prior to Chile. Nobody knew about it, and suddenly there was the factory car right there. Just brilliant. So big thanks to Terry, obviously, for doing that, and because he wasn't well, and he just shortly after his return from Chile. Also to Hyundai Motorsport, to Red Bull, and to WRC, the World Rally Championship, for making that happen. Really, really good. Let's get back into it then. And I mean, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if he did that hypercar thing with Genesis later on? That'd be staggering. I think he'd go well too. He does like racing. He's done a bit of it. So I'm trying to get back to where... Before we go any further, I should apologise I've just been able to catch up on a few messages. The audio, when I was showing the pictures of the Haas Ferrari Toyota, disappeared, and I apologize for that. The reason that disappeared, for those that are interested, is that I use a platform, a recording platform, which is actually an editing suite, if you like, very good, called OBS, and it's very good, but it's got a few idiosyncrasies. And one is that if you are going to import an image, you don't just import the image, you then have to continue to apply the same audio that you're using, that I'm speaking through right now, hopefully it's coming through loud and clear, to each image, which I normally do, and I've always done. But because just before this started, there was another glitch with the whole thing over the chat, which I still can't get to bring up on the screen again, as you can see. I was focused 100% on that and talking to a friend of mine on the phone who's quite clued up, and we didn't come to any sort of solution. But because of all that, I completely forgot, well, didn't leave enough time, well, forgot, because I would have done it had I remembered, to get the audio live for those two images. So I'm really sorry. Not much point in doing it now, but what I was doing was describing really the three people standing by the car, who were Ao Komatsu, Akio Toyoda, who's the president, chairman of Toyota, and Tomoya Takahashi, who's the head of Toyota Gazoo Racing. And I was making the point that Akio Toyoda is a really interesting guy, because he's not only at the top of the world's largest car company, probably, but he's also loves racing. He's done quite a lot of racing in long endurance events, in Toyotas, obviously, Nürburgring, places like that, and gone quite well in class, in terms of class results. And he alone was the man behind the Yaris GR. So if you own one of those, he's the guy you got to thank for having it. So if you've got a man like that at the top of the company with that much racing blood in his veins, it's not a big ask to think, yeah, one, they're going to be back in Formula One, and probably they will be back with the new engine rigs. Probably not in 2026, but not long after that, I think. And it'll be interesting to have them in Formula One again. Of course, they were in with the V8s and the V10s, and Zach Brown has already put out his feelers towards Toyota as well, with his hiring of Ryo Hirakawa, who does a lot of sim work at McLaren now, but hasn't been seen in the car yet, I don't think. So we're losing sound. I'm going through all that, losing sound. Yeah. So here we are, back again. Hope everybody's enjoying the show. We'll keep going for a little bit, Lord. Steve Hadibi says, all the best to you and your family, Mr. Windsor. Appreciate you sharing your inimitable wisdom about Formula One. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very kind. It's not an effort, really. You know, I love hanging out with you guys, and aren't we lucky to have this thing called YouTube? We take it for granted, like most things in life these days. The technology is incredible, but we take it all for granted. Well, I do a lot of the time. But if I think back to the days when, pre-internet days, when I used to think, wow, wouldn't it be great to have some sort of chat show about motor racing on TV? And I used to do all these presentations to ITV and Channel 4, all these things in England. I'd go around in my lunch break when I was at Autocar doing all these presentations. Nothing ever came of it, as you can imagine. So there we go. Where are we going? Aaron Lee says, what is your view of the Ocon and Byrne driver pairing in terms of driving style and ceiling, C-E-I-L-I-N-G? Interesting word, but a good word, because it means, you know, how far can they go and how quick are they? Ocon versus Byrne. I think Ollie will be very, very near him. I think it'll be Albon. It'll be Albon Colapinto. But Ollie is not, at the moment, he's not a great short corner driver. He's more of a sort of budding George Russell, which is no bad thing at all. So he's very, very good racer, good head on his shoulders, to use the cliche. Ocon is a little bit shorter. I'd say he drives not unlike Daniel Ricciardo in terms of the way he prescribes a corner. Very different personalities, of course, and different approach to racing. But in terms of his actual style and use of a corner, use of a car in a corner, I'd say Ocon's quite near Ricciardo. So, which is why he's had some very, very good races, and why he's been very good in defence on occasions as well. He's just very good at getting into a rhythm and staying there. It's slightly shorter corners than Byrne, So I think if the car is good, and there's every reason to think it will be pretty good now, it'll get better at Haas. It won't be just sort of, flash in the pan, they've gone well, now they're disappearing. I think they will go well in 25. I can't imagine that the Toyota link won't have some immediate advantages as well in terms of technology and a few other bits and bobs. So yeah, I think it'll be quite interesting. I'm going to try something. I don't know if I should try it. And I was so flat out trying to solve that other problem, but I forgot the audio when I was doing those two images. And for those of you that didn't walk away and stuck with it, thank you very much. But B, I always put the hard connection line in from the internet. But to make that work, you've got to turn off the Wi-Fi. And I forgot to turn off the Wi-Fi, so we've been doing this entire program on Wi-Fi at the moment, which says quite a lot for Spain. I hope it's okay. I'm just wondering what will happen if I turn off the Wi-Fi now mid-show. My gut feeling is that it will be okay. I'm going to do it. If you lose me, I don't know what we're going to do. It will come back, I think, because it'll just be, it'll be, if it goes away for a million, I'll come back because I'll be on the hard line. So I'm going to do that because I want to use the hard line connection. Let's make sure it's working. The hard line connection just to avoid, doing it now. Okay, we've now switched to, I've switched off the Wi-Fi. Hope it's still working. So see, here's a good example. I am at him. Ocon is definitely quick, but his head is a bit up and down, temperamental. Well, yeah, but I think Ocon in the hands of Komatsu-san will be a much better driver. In the same way that the team looks better and better organised and they're doing really cool things now. I think if anybody has a logical, structured approach to racing and grew up in the days of Taku Sato and Rob Wilson and Trevor Carlin and Boyo, as he did, and Bridgestone, he's got great road dust on him, is going to be good with a guy like Ocon. He's going to get the best from him. And you wouldn't have hired him unless he felt that he had a lot of potential. So there you go. That's what I think about Ocon and all that. Kei Matsuki, no, just Mikazuki, M Kazuki, there you go, M Kazuki, finally got it. Hi Peter, what's going on with K-Mag this year? Yeah, he's just doing a K-Mag thing, isn't he? He's kind of being K-Mag, but he's not working very hard, I don't think, at being a better K-Mag and refining the things he does extremely well and working on the things that need to be worked on. He's just being K-Mag, and that's what you get. And when he's good, obviously he's very quick. I always remember Rob saying how good K-Mag was in terms of his softness of touch and his ability to manipulate a car really well. Massive potential. And I think it showed. And he was absolutely right early years at McLaren. But I think he's got that sort of slightly... what's the right word to describe him? I think let me just think of a parallel. Kind of difficult really, because he's got that sort of attitude of this is the way it is and it's not going to be any better and I'm a racing driver. And it's kind of cool in a way because he is a very pure racing driver. He just gets out there and races. On the other hand, I don't think he's improved much as a driver over the last 8 years, really. I think that's the problem. That's what we're seeing now, really. So, what are we doing? Slipstream Merchant says, hi, Peter. Do you think Rovan Perra will join Formula One in 2 to 3 years now? Toyota are back. He's done a few circuit races this year while doing WRC part-time. Yeah, he's done a few Porsche Cup races, hasn't he? And he did a good job at Monza last weekend, I think. Qualified 22nd, I think, and got up to 4th or 6th or something like that. I think he won the rookie prize for the weekend. He's very quick, Rovan Perra. I love the way he does that drifting thing. You know, he just gets... isn't he like #1 drifter in the world or something? And he's super good. I don't know, he reminds me a little bit of Stacey... what was he called? That Australian motorbike, and I don't know much about MotoGP. Stacey somebody, Chrome or something like that, who Casey Stoner, there you go, who had that slightly odd attitude, didn't he? It was like you know, he got there and he was absolutely brilliant. The minute he got there, he was wanted to take a break and didn't really enjoy any of it and gave up, sort of thing. And I'm not saying in any way Callie's like that, but he appears to have a little bit of that, you know, that he wants to do what he wants to do. I just can't imagine that he would enjoy all the drama and hassle that would come with being in Formula One. The stuff with the sponsors and the travel, the endless races. I just can't see Callie doing that. I think he's got his life pretty well sorted right now with Toyota. But I'm sure oh, there's Dexter. Sorry about that. I didn't even know Dexter was sleeping on the floor here. Oh, the doors. First it was the bee the other week, and now it's Dexter. What are you doing? It's only Mummy. What are you doing? Oh, well, there you go. So, yeah, what was I talking about? Callie Rovanpera. Yeah, he's good. Anyway, there we go. M.A. Khan says, I've seen an analysis of short corners by a driver coach. He compared Max and Lewis and suggested they had very different styles. Max with short corners, less time turning the car, extending the straights. Lewis driving tight lines, therefore using less road but more time turning the car in the corner in comparison. Well, who was that? I don't know what that means. They're very similar, Max and Lewis. So I can tell you, I don't understand all that stuff. They're very similar, and they both have that ability to angle the steering slightly and keep the straight going just a little bit longer, and then to get the car stopped down to the perfect moment for rotation, which involves massively supple inputs through the steering and the brakes and the throttle, and get the rotation at exactly the right moment, exactly the right rate. All the rates of input are perfect, and then to get the cars straight as possible, as soon as possible. That's what they do incredibly well, and they both do it to the same level now, I think. Very, very, very good. And Charles isn't far away from those two either. Very near them. They're the best three in the world for that, for sure, and they're very similar. But they both have the ability, if they need to open up the corner, go in a little bit later if that's what the tyres need. If they've got a real problem with the car, they need to nurse this, nurse that. They can do that as well. Whereas a driver like George Russell, who's very, very quick but has slightly longer corners than Lewis, if he wants then to go to short corners, can't do it. Whereas Lewis can do both, and we've seen him do both in the last couple of years with the Mercedes being as temperamental as it is. So yeah, I don't know who that was, but if he thinks they're very different, man, I don't understand what he's talking about myself. That's all I can say. Sorry. M.A. Khan continues. The coach said both were short corners. Max's style was as a Rob Wilson type of short corner, with Lewis being a tight line driver or short corner as described by Mr. Windsor. Well, I don't describe them any differently, so I don't really understand that, M.A. Khan. I think they both create shorter corners than, say, George Russell or Lando Norris. So I don't understand what he's saying there. The only thing I would say is that occasionally Lewis, more recently, has been using longer corners because he can get more out of the tyres. He can get the car be a little bit more consistent through the variables. And we saw, and it was interesting. I was watching Max on a computer the other day. Simulator, and he's doing a lap of Spa. It's on his Instagram thing, and it's quite interesting. When he gets to the top of the hill, he says, and I open up the corner a little bit on the entry to, so it's going through the second right at the top of the hill, or as you're going down the hill, that right hander. He said, I open up the corner a little bit, and he uses the same phrase somewhere else. I think going into Stavilo, he says, I open up the corner a bit. And so you could think that, well, he's not a short corner driver because he's opening up the corner. But of course, the reality is he's saying that because on the corners where he's not opening it up, he's doing the short corners. That's exactly the point. And you can't even see when he says, I'm opening up the corner a little bit here. You can't actually see that he's, compared with, say, Carlos Sainz, he's still going in much earlier than Sainz would at that point. So in that sense, that sim is quite good, really. DB Cooper says, do you think Jean Todt should have done more after AD21? He passed the buck to the next president. Yeah. Nah. I think it was the teams, wasn't it? that was a Red Bull thing that basically elbowed Michael Massey into making that decision, and therefore it was a Toto Wolff obligation to fight back, and that's how it should have been. It should have been. I think in terms of the letter of the regulation, there was not much they could do, but I imagine Todd was assuming Mercedes would take that all the way to court. I imagine, because that was the logical thing. Why wouldn't they have done that? But they didn't. So terrible. Debbie Maffio says, War, WAUGH, the better captain batsman compared with Ricky Ponting. Important discussion going on here on Windsor's live stream, motor racing live stream. By the way, just going back to Terry Neuville, I thought his explanation of why opening the stage in 2024 is very different from opening the stage in Ogier's era was exceptionally good, and his tolerance and his humility, actually, I thought was excellent. What a great guy. And I'm still astonished that Ogier, with all that success behind him, spoke that way about Terry Neuville. I'm absolutely amazed, actually. Anyway, there's a lot of talk about Abu Dhabi 21 here, and I'm a bit, here's another. Shaq Marriott says, this is a super chat, could you answer M.A. Khan 3-part question, please? Well, I just have, that was all about that, the short corner thing. And I was a bit confused because I don't really, I've never said that Lewis goes in tighter than Max Verstappen. All I've said is both of them execute short corners almost to perfection. Very, very similar. That's all I've ever said. So here we go. Let me have a look. I keep jumping all over the place now because I'm using a different chat system now, so I've got to get this right. Yeah, a lot of Abu Dhabi chat here. So DB Cooper, when talking about Andretti, why do you always blame the FIA and not Liberty, despite the FIA wanting Andretti? Well, did they? Do they? It's one thing to say they want them, it's another thing to let it happen. Because I'm not blaming them. All I'm saying is the decision and all the announcements all came from the FIA, not from Liberty. So it was all endorsed by the FIA. And ultimately, I'm not saying again who's to blame here. Ultimately, it's the teams that make the decision, because the teams say to Liberty and the FIA, we don't want Andretti, we don't want new teams coming in. If a new team comes in, they've got to buy one of us, and we've got to make a fortune, and we've got to keep it at 10 teams. That's what they say. And so Liberty and FIA then go out and execute that decision, basically. What I've said was that if Andretti's going to fight this through Jim Jordan and the Senate in America, basically aiming the gun at Liberty Media, he's only solving half the problem, because the real problem is still going to be the FIA, and the FIA are not going to make a decision to let Andretti in so long as the teams don't want him in. So that's all I've said. Ultimately, the FIA are very much involved. They may say they want Andretti in. They all say they want Andretti in. All the teams would say, oh yeah, we'd love to have Andretti in. Of course we would. Brilliant. What a name. Great for the sport. American hero. Oh, it means we've got to have less money. I think, well, no, not sure about that. As I said before, the parallel is Byrne saying to all the teams, do you want us to keep racing at the British Grand Prix? Do you want the British Grand Prix on the Formula One calendar? Of course, all the teams are going to say, yeah, we want the British Grand Prix. What's going on here? Right, I don't know what you guys saw then. I saw the entire YouTube platform collapse and go down And I hope, because it says end stream top right, which would suggest that the stream is still going, I hope it's still live and still going out. It's very difficult for me to tell that, if it is going. It looks as if it is, looks as if it's still live. So I'm going to carry on as if it is. I don't know why it did that. It was just like, it's like one of those days, one of those weeks, really. Better to get it all over with, I suppose. So, yeah, as I was going back to Byrne, I was talking about the whole Andretti situation is very similar to the Byrne situation when he was trying to get more money out of Silverstone. And he would say to the teams, oh, I don't want the British Grand Prix on the calendar anymore. It's a waste of time now. We lose money there. Who wants to race at the British Grand Prix? And they all put their hands up. Oh, we got to race at Silverstone. We got to have a British Grand Prix. It's so important for the sport. Blah, blah, blah. But when they realised how much money was involved, of course, behind the scenes, when they weren't making public statements, maybe drop it. And it was the same. It's the same with Andretti. A lot of people say they want Andretti in, but when it actually comes down to, okay, let's put your money where your mouth is, they won't do it. Because money, money, money is what it's all about. Kurt Pickering. Peter, any thoughts on Bathurst this weekend and Formula One drivers who've competed in the past, like Brabham, Holm, Ickx, Jones? Well, I love Bathurst and fond memories of Bathurst. I know you're not asking that, but I'm going to talk about my fond memories of Bathurst, which is going down there for the Easter race meeting, not the Armstrong 500 as it used to be known. Although I did go there for that as well. But yeah, Bathurst has got such a great atmosphere, especially if you camp there as we did, and you get there and then you have the fire in the morning. And we watched from up at Skyline at the top of the hill. I watched Jack Brabham there, definitely, Frank Matic, Leo Gagan, all the greats. And yeah, been some terrible accidents there as well. The touring cars, yeah, amazing how many decent drivers have gone there, and what a great race that was. I mean, in my era, one of the great things was watching Paddy Hopkirk and Rano Altonen and Timo Mäkinen all racing at Bathurst in the factory Mini Cooper S's. Absolutely brilliant. But yeah, it'd be lovely to see more Formula One drivers do it. Why isn't Daniel Ricciardo doing it? Oh, yeah, no, he's not racing next weekend, is he? Yeah, so he could be doing it. Why isn't he doing it? Guest appearance. He could even drive the course car like Thierry Neuville, effectively driving the course car in Austria this weekend. Need more of that. I need to see more Formula One drivers doing stuff out of context. Like Jenson Button does a good job with that. M.A. Khan, greatest driver in history. Or maybe this is the question that the Super Chat wanted me to ask. M.A. Khan, greatest driver in history. Now it's disappeared. So annoying, this. It's almost as annoying as that other chat thing I had. That's gone already. It was about Jim Clark. That's why I was getting all excited. And as soon as it disappeared. David McFarlane. Hi, Peter. What do you think of Teo Pourchaire? Will he have a chance in Formula One? I love the guy, but pretty disappointing performance in IndyCar. Yeah, a bit early to say it was disappointing. And I give him a chance. A and B, he is very good. But he will need... He's not the sort of guy, I don't think, who can just jump into a car and immediately impress. I think he's the sort of guy that works with the team very well, gets to know the team, gets a bit of mileage under him, and I think he'll go very well in any good car. His main hope now, I guess, has to be, because I think he's still on the Sauber deal, is that somewhere along the line, hopefully for 2026, he might be in that race car. And to do that, he's got to be really involved with the project now, and or doing something truly exceptional in some other branch. But probably for him right now, it's better to be linked to the Formula One project and to get I don't know, Jonathan Wheatley behind him perhaps, and try to sort of angle himself in a position where he might be in that Audi car for 26. That's about the best I think he could hope for right now. But he is very good, and shame on Formula One, that they just move on so quickly to the next guys, don't they? Soon Antonelli will be old news, and there'll be somebody else coming along. Kevin Pryor, I can't separate who was better, Gilles Villeneuve or Sterling Moss. Yeah, when Sterling was out doing the Alpine Rally and doing his Bonneville Salt Flats straight line speed stuff, or winning the Mille Miglia with Dennis Jenkinson, in other words, not racing Formula One but going incredibly well, Gilles would have been, snowmobiling and driving Formula Atlantic and beating the Formula One greats in Formula Atlantic, and so the versatility levels were very similar, I would say. And yeah, I can't make a decision about that because I'm so fond of both of those drivers, Sterling and Gilles, that to differentiate between the two would be a crime, would be a sin. I can't do it. I think they were both absolutely astonishingly good, and I miss them both terribly. And yeah, that's all I can say. Gilles was absolutely brilliant. So was Sterling. And they both should have won, not one world championship, they should have won 8 world championships each. But for different reasons, obviously, they didn't. Kevin Pryor, are there any more young British drivers coming through the ranks and competing in Formula One? Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty. And Luke Browning is just one of them. Won Macau, doing pretty well in Formula 3 right now. Pretty good season. And lots of talent. But many others. I mean, too many for me to really differentiate again. I wouldn't want to do that. But yeah, I really... In Britain, it's not in any way fading at all in terms of the next talent coming along. Creative Expression says, I was curious as to Peter's take as the best driver who never won a world title. Yeah, well, it would be Sterling, ultimately. It doesn't mean to say that I can really differentiate between him and Gilles, because Gilles didn't win a title for a different reason. And they're so similar as drivers. I guess Sterling has to have the edge, I guess, over Gilles, but only just. Yeah, you put me in a corner there. Kevin Pryor offering his thoughts and prayers for my mum. Thank you very much. Who's not well, but she's at peace in her care home now, so we're going to be seeing her shortly. M. Arshad Zahangir Chowdhury. Hello there. Mr. Windsor, your name sounds as if you'd be an opening bat for India, but anyway, that's another matter. Mr. Windsor, how can Fernando continue to perform at such high level at his age, whereas Ricardo, Bottas and other younger drivers not performing as well? Is it skill or something to do with the car? No, it's to do with burning ambition, which is a bit of an intangible. The phrase was, to my knowledge, was first coined by Mario Andretti when describing the difference between his two sons, Jeff and Michael. Michael was the guy with the burning ambition. Jeff was the guy with a slightly higher level of talent. And Michael, of course, was the guy that went on to win with great success in IndyCar. So burning ambition is what keeps Fernando going. It keeps him young, basically. Yeah, and racing in your 40s is not impossible at all. As we've seen with Manuel Fangio, Jack Brabham won his 3rd world title at the age of 40 and was still racing competitively against Jochen Rindt wheel to wheel when he was 44. And Fernando could race at least another 3 to 4 years, in my opinion. The first thing that will go will be the peripheral vision, and that's quite a difficult thing to monitor because it's not something that would necessarily show up on the annual eye check. But drivers will be aware of it, obviously, and you can see Thierry Neuville doing. A lot of rally drivers do eye exercise like this, rolling the eyes around. Gilles used to do a lot of that, and that'll be the first thing that'll go. If anything is going to go because of age, it'll be peripheral vision. But Fernando's still got that, absolutely, and because he's got a sort of Lewis Hamilton-like simplicity of what he loves about racing, and Max for that matter too. Charles less so, but Max and Lewis definitely have a similar thing to Fernando, where they can just sort of, that is what they love about racing, and nobody will ever touch that. And that's a very personal thing. You feel that in your heart and your soul, and that's what Fernando has. He has that, and he's always protected that very well. And when he's had hard times and he's had to get out of Formula One, he's gone and done something else, and he's done a pretty good job of it. I mean, obviously the Indy thing didn't really work out as well as it should have, but sports cars, he was great. And yeah, he'll be, it's a difficult time for Fernando, I think, as I said before, because really to benefit from the arrival of Adrian Newey at Aston Martin, he has to be around in 26. That's quite a big ask at the moment. He may well be around in 26. He may win 5 races next year, and Aston Martin may re-sign him for a further 3 years or something. Could be brilliant. Equally, he may have a tough year next year, forever, for whatever reason. And some Aston Martin might, Max might be available or whatever, and they might put Max alongside baby Lance. And so, he needs to... Fernando's goal right now is to make sure he's racing in 26, I think, because he wants to race with Adrian Newey. He spent too many years getting beaten by cars designed by Adrian Newey. Now he wants to race one, and that'll be his thing. That'll be his deep down. That's what he keeps going. That's why he keeps getting out of bed and getting into a racing car. Kevin Pryor, is 66 the year at Spa when Stewart went off and nearly got killed? I think he had a spanner on his steering wheel ever since then. Yeah, 66 Belgian Grand Prix, opening lap. It was dry at the start, wet at Byrne, and Jackie, along with many others, Joe Bonnier, another good example, went off. Just the car, just aquaplane, the BRM aquaplane, he went off and hit various bits and bobs and ended up on the inside of the track. And Graham Hill stopped because he saw it, and Jackie was trapped in the car with fuel everywhere. And Graham got him out. No seat belts, no spanner on the steering wheel. He was trapped for quite a long time. And by the time they got out, there was so much fuel, Graham stripped him of his overalls, and he's lying there naked. When the famous story of the nuns coming in to see Jackie naked. And yeah, after that, he did have that spanner taped to his wheel, and then he did start wearing seatbelts, and then he did start having the rollover hoop actually playing a role in survival, and that's where it all started. And a lot of what we have today in safety can be traced right back to that moment. And also that time, Louis T. Stanley, who was a major player at BRM, was obviously Jackie was driving for Louis Stanley, and Louis Stanley decided to go ahead and with the plan to build this mobile medical unit that would then go to the European Grand Prix, a huge, great articulated truck, which was basically a mobile hospital, and went to all these races in 67. And that was all due to Jackie and Louis Stanley. Amazing thing. So, creative expression by Dion says, he's replying to Arshad Chowdhury. He says, Fernando is a once-in-a-generational talent, but unfortunately he's made some bad choices and not been in the best cars. Yeah, I mean, some of that has been Fernando's own making. He could have stayed at Ferrari, for example, but he kind of drove the team apart and isolated Felipe Massa, which is quite a difficult thing to do because Felipe is a pretty easygoing guy, and assumed he was going to get a drive at Red Bull. So it was just bad management, really, on his part, because Red Bull never rang him. So he ended up, McLaren, where it was going backwards. So, a lot of weird things with Fernando like that. He could have done a better job of staying at McLaren Mercedes when he did with Lewis, but he just couldn't handle Lewis in the other car and all the stuff that came with it. So that was that, short-lived. So yeah, you could argue he could have won a lot more races, a lot more world championships. Lagrangian density. Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, I should know that name, shouldn't I, by now? Should just roll off the tongue, like the Bernoulli effect. Hi Peter, we all know your build of tough stuff, but I just wanted to take a beat and say thank you. You set a great example in a difficult time. Please know this is seen, heard and respected. That's very kind, thank you. Well, I'll use that as an excuse for all the glitches in the show today. The lack of sound when I had the still images up, and also I think hopefully it was still going, the drama then with the internet. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was a delayed reaction to going to the hardline. Syriac. Hi Peter, I've always been curious about gardening leave. In this modern era of collaborative software, how could it be possible to stop Adrian Newey helping Aston Martin before time? Well, it can't be. It's completely impossible to stop him doing that. As I said at the time, it's all nonsense. It's a great period of time for people like Adrian because they can garden out the back of their house, the old Brussels sprouts and potatoes and stuff out the back, and at the same time he can have a few mates around who happen to know a few mates, and he can say, well, if I was at Aston Martin, which I'm not, I would do this with it. This is the front ride height I'd give them for Austin, and that's what I do with the rear dampers, and that's what I do with the thing. But it's a shame I can't tell them all that because I'm on gardening leave. And they'd all go to the pub, and then the next thing you know, they're on the car. I mean, how do you stop that? Forget about all the electronic stuff. You just have your mates around. So there you go. Here we go. M.A. Khan, greatest driver in history. Jim Clark, 72 races, 25 wins, 10 times retired from the lead. The man was astonishing. He was so far ahead of his competitors, including fellow greats. And that, of course, this is P. Windsor talking now, doesn't include all the non-championship Formula One races he won or nearly won, and all the other races he won or nearly won. Formula 2, Tasman, USAC, and sports cars and touring cars. So, yeah, the greatest driver in history. Absolutely correct. Take my hat off to that. He was and is, and don't forget 2025 is some sort of anniversary of 1965 when Jim Clark won both the Indy 500 and the Formula One World Championship in the same year, and despite missing the Monaco Grand Prix to win the Indy 500, he clinched that Formula One Championship still with 3 races to go. Not bad. And also that year he won the Tasman Championship and the French Formula 2 Championship, and won lots of non-championship races, Formula One races, and sports car races. So, yeah, good year's work. Actually, thinking about it, it would be an absolute scandal today, wouldn't it? But in 1964, just think about this, 1964, the Monaco Grand Prix was held on May the 10th. In 1965, it was held on May the 30th. Now, why do you think that is? May the 30th is Memorial Day in the United States, the day of the Indianapolis 500. So quite obviously the FIA wanted to prevent Formula One drivers going over and doing Indy when they should be focusing on Formula One and detracting from Formula One by going to Indy. So they put the Monaco Grand Prix on. They advanced it, 3 weeks, in order to make it clash with Indianapolis. And of course it worked. Most of the drivers said, oh, well, we'll do Monaco then. But not Jim Clark and Colin Chapman, who said, right, that's what they're going to do. We're going to go and win the Indy 500. Thank you very much. I mean, it's just astonishing, isn't it, when you think about that and the politics of that. And there was nothing was said about that at the time. It was just, oh, well, Clark won't be racing at Monaco. Team Lotus won't be at Monaco. And the race, carry on. Graham Hill drove a brilliant race that day and won the Monaco Grand Prix 65, but there were no Lotuses there. Lotus. The plural of Lotus is Lotus, Colin Chapman once said. So, but Jimmy was at Indy, dominating, winning. Fabulous. What times they were. 1965. The year of the E-Type versus the Elan of Gene Shrimpton and Twiggy and, the miniskirt and the Beatles and all things wonderful in Formula One. Beautiful looking cars, drivers were perfectly in proportion with the cars, the helmets, the Lotus 33, the BRM, the Ferrari with the blue wheels, just wonderful. And circuits were still the great circuits, the Nürburgring, Spa, Silverstone, Zandvoort, Clermont-Ferrand, East London, South Africa, Mexico City, Watkins Glen, Monza. What a time, 65. And the anniversary next year. Right. So a lot of discussion about Abu Dhabi and Silverstone 21. No, move on. Well, not move on. That's what Mercedes did. No, we shouldn't be saying that. Mercedes shouldn't have moved on so quickly after 21. But equally, I think we need to move on this one. On a lighter note, says Lagrangian density. On a lighter note, the world where Piastri has Safnauer as a team principal. I'm happy Oscar has the McLaren drive, but I would love to see Otmar and Oscar together in any team. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I was thinking about Otmar today, wondering what he thinks about, because he's very good on budget caps, Otmar. I'll try and talk to him about this, because I was just thinking, almost certainly, I'd say almost certainly, and this is just me saying this, I shouldn't in any way make out there's anything other than just my opinion, but almost certainly Toyota will be providing free chassis to Haas, I would suspect. You could say in lieu of sponsorship, but I bet there's some sponsorship there as well. So how does that actually fit in with the budget cap? I'm sure there's some sort of allotted amount that if you've managed to find the greatest supplier of chassis in the world who does it for free, you nonetheless have to have a certain amount added to your budget cap or taken out of your budget, as it were. But I don't know that. I assume that's the case. I wanted to check with Otmar about that. But going back to the Otmar Oscar thing, yeah, it's a shame. I think, you know, it would have been good because I spoke to Otmar before the Oscar thing happened, before it all blew apart. And he was nothing but incredibly, you know, excited about Oscar Piastri and how good he was. And, you know, I was saying, wow, you know, pretty amazing team you're going to have now, because he is good. He's really good. And he said, yeah, can't wait. You know, we're going to put him in the race car. And they did put him in the race car and they announced it. The next thing he knew, he was driving a McLaren. And obviously they'd been very slack with their paperwork. But then again, you know, as I say, a lot of drivers don't even have paperwork. Jackie Stewart never had a written contract with Ken Tyrrell. So it was all very unfortunate. And I think it's a shame, actually, because as I say, I said earlier, if Oscar had stayed at Alpine, he would have blown away Ocon, and then he probably would have got the Mercedes drive when Lewis left. Not that that's better than the McLaren drive. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is he would be in a Mercedes now alongside George Russell, which would be interesting, wouldn't it? Here's an interesting one. Klocksky says, if Abu Dhabi 21 had been race 1, no one would have cared. We'd have seen Lewis throw the title through the season and recovering too late. It's an interesting one. Yeah, I think what you're saying there, though, in reality, Klocksky, is that if it had been race 1, maybe Jonathan Wheatley wouldn't have been so vociferous in the radio towards Michael Massey, and Michael Massey wouldn't have made that decision. I think that's the point. Because there's no way Abu Dhabi 21 would have been Abu Dhabi 21 had it been race 1. Why? Why would they have got so excited about it? The reason that they did get on the radio and had that big shouting match with Massey was because it was the finale. Carl, this is why everybody's talking about Tommy Byrne now. Carl595. I've just watched a documentary on Disney Plus about Tommy Byrne. Did you know him? If so, how good was he? Yeah, he was really good. And I've said, you know, he was right up there. And he wasn't an abrasive character at all. He was a lovely guy when I knew him, when we used to go. We played squash. I keep saying that. It seems odd now. Do people play squash still? I don't know. But there was a squash court very near where we lived. And we used to meet there and bash each other's brains out and then go and whatever, have a drink somewhere. And yeah, he was just a good bloke, very good racing driver. And we used to talk a lot about driving, actually, and racing and all the fine details. And there was never any doubt in my mind that he was going to be super quick in Formula One. I always thought that about Tommy. But he just, you know, ever since that McLaren test with Tyler Alexander, he just felt Tyler took an instant dislike to him and didn't rate him. And everything he wanted to do with the car, anything he wanted to do, when he wanted to go out, everything Tyler said no. And he just never really, you know, hit it off. Right. Yeah, Sarah says, gardening leave also happens when you want to leave a big company. I've been on gardening leave twice. It's nice. Ha, ha, ha. I know somebody on gardening leave at the moment from an F1 team. But he's not that comfortable because none of the real paperwork has yet been completed. So he doesn't know what's going to happen yet. So sometimes it works for you, sometimes it doesn't. Okay. Ivan Borg says, you sometimes paint an alternative picture of how Formula One should be, like how V8s shouldn't have been scrapped. The Windsor version of how Formula One should be is grounds for a TV series, better than DTS, I think. Thank you. Well, I'll tell you what it would have. It would definitely have the second tier championship going to all the countries that don't yet have Grand Prix, that are trying hard to get onto the Formula One calendar. Give them a race. It can be the second tier Formula One championship for the young guys. And there should be teams, a bit like the Formula One Academy, if you like, but there should be teams, dedicated teams who run those cars. They can be, whatever it is, McLaren, Ferraris, Red Bulls, and all the teams on the grid provide last year's car or the previous year to that. And obviously you have to have regulations that they all have to be modified to meet. And it's a championship in its own right. And it has its own sponsorship, and it has its own financing system, and its own TV deal, and it runs as a second tier to Formula One. And not only does it give massively important racing mileage to the young drivers who are going nowhere in many cases, but also it enables countries that want to be on the full Grand Prix calendar to stage a race that costs maybe, 70% less. So that's what I think we should have. That's what I would have. And then the main series, well, I would never have scrapped them, as you say. I would never have scrapped V8s. I would never have scrapped V10s, actually, because they sounded better than the 8s. And they were super reliable, very relatively cheap, and incredibly impressive. And I still think Formula One should have its own Formula E championship. Formula E should never have grown as a separate championship from Formula One. It should have been part of the Formula One show, just as I think this second tier championship should be. And it didn't, because of the big fight between Byrne and John Todd. It was all a personal thing. That's why Formula E is not within the Formula One family. And if Formula E was within the Formula One family, there wouldn't be so much pressure on Formula One continually to have to go to electrification or all the other aspects that it's having to do. It could just focus on being the show. And great racing cars, not costing a fortune, very close racing. That's what I would have done. Yeah, somebody was... a friend of mine actually sent me a video on what Alonso's been saying about the safety car drought. Okay. I didn't actually open it because it happened at a lot going on in my life at that time. But basically he said, this is creative expression by Dion, saying, basically he said, because of reliability of the cars and lack of all-out racing, because of having to race tyre wear, that the number of safety cars was diminished, basically. Yeah, that's probably right. And is it a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, I think it's a good thing. I don't like safety car interventions, but I suppose some people think, oh no, if it's a boring race, bring out the safety car, break up the boredom. Why isn't that happening? Oh, they're all worrying about tyres now. Okay, blame Pirelli. To me, it's, of course it's that. It's everybody having to focus more on tyre management and what else did he say? Lack of all-out racing. Well, he's talking about tyres, Pirelli. But it ultimately comes back to Pirelli, and I don't think that's correct. I think we need to respect Pirelli's position in the sport, which is that they're the only tyre company out there that wanted to do this, and to do a monopoly job in Formula One is very difficult because there's usually only downside to it in terms of publicity. And I think Pirelli do an amazing job, and we should all respect that. Particularly the drivers should respect that at all times. George Russell, take note, and kind of Fernando, take note, because he's basically saying that having to manage the tyres has ruined the racing, is what he's saying. But, ultimately, if Aston Martin had a quicker car and Fernando Alonso is racing for the lead, as McLaren are, we wouldn't be worried about safety cars, would we? We'd be saying, wow, isn't this a great season? So that's my real take on that. Creative expression by Dion continues. Sadly, we don't get to see any of the World Rally races here in the United States, which saddens me. As an American race fan of all forms of motor racing, sadly, we are dominated by so few series. Yeah, I mean, it's the World Rally Championship sort of comes and goes from various regions, doesn't it? And but they're expanding. They've got a race in, the Middle East certainly next year, somewhere else. Croatia, I think they're going back to, something like that. And one other, it's expanding, it's looking good. And it saddens me in a way that we have the Formula One fans, and they're Formula One fans, but they don't actually watch anything else. And that means they're only interested in all the gloss and not the real substance of motorsport. Because it defies understanding how you can love Formula One, but not equally think, wow, Kalle Rovanperä, Thierry Neuville, Sébastien Ogier, Elfyn Evans, total megastars. Adrian Formeau, add him to that as well. Add Ott Tanak. All unbelievable drivers. And you talk to any Formula One driver in the pit lane, they all say the same thing. And most rally drivers say the same about Formula One. So for people to say, oh, I don't like rallying, it's just so short-sighted and stupid, really. I think I just can't get my head around that, because to me, that's like saying, well, let's not appreciate Sterling Moss, because Sterling Moss started rallying. So did Jim Clark. So did Carlos Reutemann. So did Juan Manuel Fangio. And so did many others, Vic Elford. And they're all... Rallying is an unbelievable sport. When you think of all the factors that come into being successful in running a rally and winning a rally, it's an unbelievable sport. I'd love to go to Japan, actually, and see the Japanese rally of Japan. Central European, too. I'd love to see the cars on tarmac there and what they look like. They look great on gravel, don't they? But you saw a bit of the tarmac in the video I did there and how good they look. Right, and where are we at? 2:30. I've been going for 2 hours now, so won't do too much more. So shame about America. Hopefully it'll come back, because it should. I think Americans would love rallying, but they tend to want it. They tend to want just the super special stage right at the end, wouldn't they? All in one arena, which isn't the same. So yeah, we're all talking about gardening leave. That's good. Creative expression there. Oh, I fully understand that part, but with modern tech, it's a lot harder to enforce than it was in, say, 1970s, smartphones. Yeah, I think with smartphones, you want to be a bit careful, though, because if you're on gardening leave and you start using smartphones, then something is traceable, isn't it? You're better off having your mates around while you're, as I say, you're digging up the Brussels sprouts and just chatting to them, which I'm sure they all do. So... gardening leave. It says Sarah is a lawyer, and she says gardening leave is gardening leave, and you have to accept it. Okay, all right. There you go. Creative. Back to Mr. Windsor says creative expression. Prayers for your mum. Thank you very much, mate. Thank you for all your commentary and racing disciplines over the decades. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very sweet. Right. What's this? Sarah says, well, it's also about class. When you're on a certain level, you sign up for these things. If you don't, you get fined for each breach and your reputation goes in trouble. So most, I know, well behaved. Okay, all right. About to see some more here. Lots of questions, lots of comments. Okay, still going fine. That's when we rejoined. Okay, good. So... Langranian Density says Neuville seems absolutely lovely both inside and outside of the car. The interviews with him have been some wonderful insight in the mind of a top-rated racing driver. Thank you very much. That's exactly what I wanted to try to achieve. This guy's more than just a rally driver. He's got a racing driver's brain, and he often refers to himself as a racing driver. Have you seen that? And as I say, I'm lucky to have sat next to him, and it was absolutely stupefying how good he was. And I'm sure it'd be the same with Rowan Perra. I'm not sure that I would feel quite as confident, only because with Neuville, you get the feeling that he's just so on top of everything. He's like a sort of, I don't know, sort of Jackie Stewart in the way he's got everything in his brain in the right area. Apart from, have you seen that thing on Instagram when he's about to get in the car and somebody says, look at the flag on the top, Terry, and of course it's the Tanak flag. And he's about to get into Tanak's car, only in rallying. Imagine Lewis just about to jump into George Russell's car. Quite fun, actually, wouldn't it? See what happened. SBB says, why all the negativity about 26 Audi program? What stops a team, I'm assuming substantial investment, becoming a front runner? Good question. A lot of good people have joined and then left, which indicates something for sure, a bit like the FIA. And at the moment, and I think they've got a problem with the union laws in Germany. It's a difficult situation for them. And if you've spent so many years being successful in sports cars, I think it's a bit of a culture shock to then get into Formula One with the schedules involved in designing and building a Grand Prix car from scratch and doing it on time. I think that's a very difficult problem if you throw in all the union laws as well. I think that's what's going on. So, yeah, quite a lot of negativity. For me, if I had to take a bet, I think they'll end up buying a customer engine and powertrain, probably, to get into it. Maybe even a car. Dallara. Especially if Dallara are no longer associated with Haas. Maybe that'll be the way Audi might get into Formula One in the first year or two. Would make sense, actually. And I'm sure Aldo Costa would be into doing that. Aldo and Mattia Binotto are probably old mates, I would think. I'm only thinking of that as I speak, but could happen, couldn't it? Dallara Audi with, I don't know, whatever engine, and Renault engine? Get the Renault engine? That'd be funny, wouldn't it? It was a really quick engine in the back of an Audi. There we go. I don't think, a big good way of getting a really talented guy there would be to do a deal with Dallara and make sure Aldo Costa's involved. I would go for that deal. Thought of by P. Windsor. There you go. There you go. So lots going on here. Let's find some more. Mirko Fofolio says, why don't they just make better tyres? 15 years ago, they had tyres that did the whole race. Well, yeah, because Formula One messed it up. They managed to drive Michelin out of the sport by accusing them of cheating. The most conservative tyre company in the history of conservative tyre companies. Great French tyre company. So they disappeared in, 2006, I think, when Ferrari accused them of cheating, that famous press conference in Monza, led by Jean Todt and Ross Brawn. And so Michelin were out. And then Bridgestone carried on for a couple of years and then decided that actually having a monopoly was a bit too difficult because there was only downside to it. And that was the bad publicity when something went wrong with the tyre. But nobody ever really talked about the tyres when the race was won. And they decided it was very expensive too, and there were plenty of other things they could do, so they pulled out. Whereupon Byrne said to the team, so what are we going to do about tyres? And they said, well, surely get Michelin back. He said, yeah, forget that one. That ain't going to happen. Goodyear, no money. Japanese Dunlop, no, ain't going to happen. That's a problem. Well, I've got a suggestion, said Byrne. I'll do the tyres. What? You? Yeah, I did it before. Avon tyres. We'll bring Avon back into Formula One. Yeah, no problem. I'll charge you a minimum price, They all have this vision of Byrne making special tyres for one team and not another, and nobody knowing what was going on and being no nomenclature on the sidewalls. They said, no, can't happen, Byrne, please. Oh, well, I could maybe twist Pirelli's arm, get them in. I was with them, as you remember. I'll get Pirelli in. Pirelli, well, yeah, that'd be good. But I can tell you now, if they come in, they ain't got a massive budget. They ain't going to spend a lot on the tyres, but they'll be in. They'll give you tyres, they'll give you rubber, and they'll probably spend a lot. They did the calendar, all that stuff. They'll probably spend a lot on the old PR, which would be good. Yeah, get Pirelli. And thus we have Pirelli. That's how it all started. How to make the job as easy as possible for Pirelli. I not have to design and build a tyre that will do a full Grand Prix distance. Well, let's break the race up and have a new rule that you got to make a pit stop on 2 different compounds. Oh, that'd be good. They only have to build a tyre that does 30 laps, then good. Makes it a bit cheaper. That's why we're in this situation. Nobody else would do it. And Pirelli have done an amazingly good job over the years, to the point where nobody ever realises that's how it all started. They all think, oh, isn't this brilliant? Pirelli, the logos, the signage everywhere, mega. And people criticise them. People have the audacity to criticise Pirelli. I still can't get my head around that. George Russell slagging off Pirelli. What is the point? What would you rather be on? Concrete tyres? Square blocks? Do a good job for Pirelli, they'll do a good job for you. And they've done an amazing job. How many tyre failures have we seen this year? That's what you have to worry about with the tyre company when they have a monopoly. Tyre failures. Because obviously they're going to wind back on the technology because they've got no one to beat. So you have to worry about that. And they've done an unbelievable job with safety and strength and lack of tyre failures. And we should be celebrating Pirelli and not saying, why aren't the tyres any better? And I just don't understand why people don't, because people have very short memories. They've come into the sport at a certain time and a certain level, and they've just seen Pirelli as the monopoly supplier. And they don't understand where it all came from and how lucky we are to have Pirelli. Who else would do this? Who would it be? Hankook or something? I don't know. Pirelli's got a much nicer ring to it. Nothing against Hankook, great tyres. But if you want to have a nice blue chip company with their logo around Formula One, Pirelli's your company, isn't it? Right now. So, there we go. Kevin Pryor says, I don't know how much long Peter's left on this live stream. SBB, what's your opinion of Helmut Marko's driver decisions in the last 7 years? Time for Red Bull to move on. Well, didn't do badly with Max Verstappen, did he? A few rocky roads before that. I'm not sure if we can call Sebastian Vettel a Red Bull driver, can we? Wasn't he a Formula BMW? Shouldn't BMW get all the credit for that one? I think so. Anyway, they got him kind of in the early stage, so they can sort of take 3/4 credit for him. But Max was a real deal, and they got Max. So if you've done Max, you can kind of say, well, been there, done that. But there have been a lot of young drivers that they've discarded, obviously, and that's not a good thing. hasn't done much for their careers. And as went back to right at the start of this live stream, the problem with all these driver academies, not only Red Bull, is that they've got scouts at kart events right at the junior level. Most of the scouting is based on the size of the motorhome operating around the young driver in question. In other words, how much money's the family got? A, and B, how quick is the guy? What are his results? Where is he finishing? What's he doing? Where's he qualifying? What sort of kart is he driving? How good is his engine? How many sets of tyres does he have? All taking into account the budget. Doesn't actually, not that you can learn that much at karting level anyway, but it doesn't take much account of the actual style and ability of the driver. So then they move up into, say, Formula 4 as the next thing. That's when you can start to see what a driver's going to do. It's not just stabby inputs that you need for karts. But at that level, they continue the same evaluation system. It then doesn't break down into this guy's a short corner driver, this guy's slightly longer, this guy's got incredible footwork, this guy's got amazing handwork, this guy's got fabulous racing brain but doesn't spend too much time in the gym. Whatever the idiosyncrasies are, we don't see that. All it's to do with is money and results, basically. And that's where it goes wrong. And that's why even Red Bull fall into that trap all the time. And there's not enough looking at the talent of the drivers out on the circuit of what they actually do. I'm a bit fired up about this, and I think I'm going to try and think of a driver I can interview, maybe for the next live stream, who is a good example of a young driver who needs more attention and hasn't been respected correctly by the academies. I'll try and think of somebody and chat to him and see what he thinks, see what we can do there. There's too much of it. There's too much wasted talent around, I think. Frederick Thorne says, we're so blessed to have such an amazing insight. Oh, I thought you were going to say, so blessed to have a driver like Fernando Alonso around. You said, insight and passionate journalistic view of racing as Peter Windsor. Thank you very much. That's very kind. I'm sure there are plenty of others out there, and I know many. I mean, Nigel Roebuck, my dear friend, is much more knowledgeable than I and much more eloquent than I in every respect. What he isn't is very tech savvy. And if I said, Nigel, here's a Zoom link, let's do something, he'd say, what? So would Rob Wilson. Rob Wilson with his 15-year-old Nokia mobile phone. So, yeah. Nothing against Nokia. They do great stuff now, but he's got one of the old Nokias. No screen sort of thing. I think it's got a screen, it's just a digital number comes up. Here we are. Somebody saying Windsor doesn't let Abu Dhabi go. You're the guys that have been talking about Abu Dhabi, not me. I won't blame me for it. All I'm saying is Abu Dhabi was a scandal. So there you go. So I'm not going to... You two blokes, that's been quite rude about that. That's not me. I've said it at the time, but you keep raising it. So I think there we go. Kevin Price said something quite nasty about Helmut Marko, and I'm not going to talk about that because show some respect. Marko, very, very quick racing driver. And nice that he found a home at Red Bull in the back part of his career. Dietrich Mateschitz obviously had a lot of faith in him, and I respect for that. I don't think he's done a better or worse job than anybody else out there running these Formula One driver academies. They're all based on money and handshakes, the firmness thereof, and the results sheet. They're not based on reality. And it's not only Marko, it's all of them. So if you want to criticise Marko, criticise all of them. Best Aussie Formula One moment. This is from Bull. Best Aussie Formula One moment. Alan Jones wins championship. Piastri's first win. Worst moment. Webber just missed out on championship. Yeah, that was terrible, that Webber thing, wasn't it? He should have won that championship at Abu Dhabi. But, yeah. Best Aussie Formula One moment? Surely Jack Brabham winning the 66 World Championship in his own car, wasn't it? Or not? This is where history is important to be remembered. I know you're probably thinking of modern times. So what do modern times mean? To me, 66 is only yesterday. That's modern. Rear engine car, what more do you want? Lovely 3-litre V8, Repco V8 engine, Buick block, Jack Brabham, Ron Toronac, building their own cars, Byfleet, Surrey, England. And they go and win the World Championship, beating the red cars. Wow. Matt Alford says, hi Peter, hope you're doing okay. Since my days of following Formula One, they go back to the mid-80s. Teo Fabi, his name from the past. He could be quick on his day, couldn't he? He could. He was very quick. Yep, and that March BMW Formula 2 car, and then the Brabham through BMW coming into Formula 1 with Brabham. Really good. And the Tolman thereafter. Very fast driver. Didn't say much. Let his driving do the talking. Small, stocky guy. Always got on well with Teo. I didn't say much then. He didn't say much. And we just sort of had a laugh periodically. And I bumped into Teo at Monza a couple of years ago. I think I've told this story. Apologies if you've heard it. It's worth telling again. He was there with his son. I think he was called Marco. He's called Marco. I'm not sure. Anyway, his son, who's in a wheelchair. And I saw Teo and we had a bit of a chat and a smile. And he introduced me to his son. And his son, of course, had a racing accident. But at one point it was Lewis's teammate in Formula 3. And Teo said, oh, you know, we're outside here because we're just hoping we can see Lewis so Lewis can say hello to him. And I thought, wow, that's great. Lewis, I'd love to see him again. And so I went into the Merc motorhome thing. And Lewis was in his room, I think. So I sort of waited for a moment when the media army weren't going to stop me, and sneaked up the stairs and knocked on Lewis's door and said, Lewis, let's Teo Fabi's son, I think you know him, is outside and he'd love to just see you. And he said, really? And he was in the middle of something, really? And just came straight down and saw him, saw Teo. I'll never forget that. That's the Lewis I know. And that's the Teo I know as well. Really good. Corrado was quick too. Corrado Fabi, his brother. They're both good, the Fabis. And Teo Fabi was famous for winning the 1980 Hockenheim Formula 2 race because Nigel Mansell finished second in that race in the Ralt Honda. That was the race in which Ron Taranaki decided to bring Nigel back into the Formula 2 team, having sacked him after doing all the development work and 3 or 4 races. He then sacked him for a quicker driver, Tom Gloy. And then invited Nigel. He realised he made a mistake. He hired Jeff Lees and then hired Nigel back to drive the second car at Hockenheim. And Nigel finished second to Teo that day. Joe Sco says, Alonso's a great team player for Team Alonso. Yeah, I think you're right there. Frederick Thorne, I didn't know who Jim Clark was before I started watching these live streams. Well, I'm glad I've been able to achieve something useful in my entire life, Frederick. That's good. It's good that you know about Jim Clark now, because he's worth knowing of. He was just amazing. And he was this sort of bi-dimensional character as well, because on the one hand he was, and even in 65 he would go back up to Scotland when he had a free weekend or a couple of free days in a row, and he'd go back to the farm, he'd drive up there usually, and drive Ian Scott Watson's red Lotus Elan around, which Ian would lend him for those few days, and he would become the farmer. He'd put on the tweed jacket and the cavalry twills and the cloth cap and take the crook in his hand and go out with the dogs, and he would herd the sheep and go to the sheep sales in wherever, and then he'd fly off to Indianapolis and win the Indy 500, or he would do a photo shoot with Bailey, with Gene Shrimpton, the model of the day, wearing a Rat Pack suit and Ray-Bans. You know, just what a cool guy. But he didn't in any way court publicity. He was very reserved and retiring, but he was humble and he was incredibly good at what he did. Amazing. You think what it was like in the winter of 64 when the news had come through that the FIA had moved the date of the Monaco Grand Prix to May 30 to stop anybody doing the Indy 500. You can imagine what it was like for Chapman and Clark to make that decision not to do Monaco. A race Jimmy wanted to win more than any other. He should have won it in Formula Junior. He should have won it in 61. 61 he was on the front row. He wasn't going to win that one. 62 he should have won it. 63 he should have won it. 64 he should have won it. So there we are. This is Monaco. And he's saying, no, okay, I'll miss Monaco and we'll do Indy. What a thing to have to decide. Wellenvids1 says, I'm late to the stream, sitting on a beach in Tenerife, delighted to have to listen to it now. Peter, hopefully we can get another short corner video with some drawings. Very interested to see it again. Yeah, we can do all that stuff. Do some more things. I'd really like to find a 3D animation expert who can just I can sit with for a day and really do some cool stuff. Might do that. It's not cheap though, that sort of thing, is it? But anyway, I'll have a go. Or I'll just do it with pencil with my own hand. Frederick Thorne says, waiting for Netflix, Jim Clark, biographic movie documentary. Funny you should say that. Not saying any more. Search YouTube. There's a lot of old footage. Yeah, there is a lot of old footage from featuring Jimmy on YouTube. But the point is to get it out there into a proper documentary on a proper platform, which involves lots of money of buying rights, and that's not cheap. You know, to do any sort of proper documentary, you're looking at least £1 million. I'm thinking actually of doing a GoFundIt thing to do a Jim Clark documentary, and all that money would go to just paying for the rights to use all the footage that I know is out there. There's moving footage of every race he did in Formula One in '65, plus of course the Indy 500, and we've discovered already some amazing footage of Jimmy. First time he drives the Lotus 38, which is the car he drove to win the Indy 500 in '65, was, would you believe, midweek Silverstone. Not even using the old pits where the Formula 2 and Formula 3 teams are these days. But Colin Chapman and Jimmy and Jim Endrowite and a few others parked their cars halfway down Hangar Straight on the outside, and there's a sort of little quadrangle of cars, and the Lotus 38 and the transporter's there. That's the pits for Jimmy, and he gets in the 38 and goes down Hangar Straight and obviously does a short lap and back again. That's when he first drove the IndyCar. We got footage of that. So, yeah, we've got some ideas out there. If anybody thinks it would actually work, to raise about £1 million to do a Jim Clark documentary, I would be willing to give it a go and push it through the YouTube channel. But I don't know. Tell me what you guys think. Any idea why it's called Formula One, Behind Secret Borders? It's a very good question. Formula One. Certainly pre-war. Formula car. It would have come out of the... Yeah, you know, when they were writing regulations, and in say in the 30s, they were mainly to do with weight and engine displacement. The way the regulations were drawn up would have included the phrases or the words Formula One, Formula Two. Formula would have been a formula for achieving the right weight versus power. That's where the word would have come from. It was a ratio thing at the time, and it was just adopted as time went on. For a long time, they were known as Grand Prix cars. And if you read Dennis Jenkinson a lot in Motorsport, the stuff he did in the 60s, wonderful Grand Prix reports, he mainly refers to Grand Prix cars as Grand Prix cars, not as Formula One cars. And Formula 2 cars he writes about, but Grand Prix cars. And often he refers to the great Grand Prix races like the French Grand Prix, the classic ones, the French Grand Prix, the Monaco Grand Prix, the Italian Grand Prix, the British Grand Prix. They were the Grande Épreuve because they were the original Grand Prix, different from the Grand Prix that later joined the calendar. Fangio drifting in shirt sleeves, for example. I am Tim. Yeah. Fangio in shirt sleeves, bare arms. A lot of them with bare arms. Gonzalez too. Big time. Big muscly arms. Matt Grafton, is Toyota trying to make their way back into Formula One? I think so, but I think in a nicely contained way and not full on Audi way, you could almost say. They're doing it in a nice way. They're starting with, they're going to take a lot of advice from Komatsu for sure at Haas and doing it right. And they're going to get all the engineers kind of familiar with the rule book, what not to do with the rule book, engineering wise, manufacturing wise, logistics wise. They'll get a feel with their association with Haas over the next 2 to 3 years. And I think they will do an engine. And I think from there, they probably will do a team again. Maybe they'll take over Haas eventually. Maybe that's the long-term plan. Kevin Pryor says, Clark and Hill for Lotus was the dream team, all British too. Well, it was a great team, wasn't it? It's interesting that Ford were sort of, when they enticed Graham Hill back to Lotus at the back end of 66, from BRM to Lotus, back to Lotus in 67, it was a Ford-funded thing and a Ford retainer for Graham Hill, which is quite a big retainer. And there's that famous truism that Walter Hayes, the man behind the funding of the £100,000 that funded the Ford Cosworth engine in 66, 67, and did the Graham Hill deal, was very fond of Jim Clark as well, and knew he had these 2 stars, and what a team it was, and this great engine from Keith Duckworth and Mike Costin and the Cosworth operation. And one day said to Jim Clark, "Jimmy, can I have a word?" And he spoke a little bit like this, Walter Hayes, very, stammered a little bit, and very, very English in the way he spoke, and very, very, very nice guy. And he said, "Jimmy, can I have a quick word?" "Yes, of course, Walter. Well, Jimmy, I'm a bit embarrassed, but we're currently paying you a little bit less than Graham. I wonder whether it'd be okay if we just sort of upped your retainer a bit." And Jimmy said, "Oh, I think that'd be good. Yeah, thank you very much. That's very kind of you." They were the days, huh? Yeah. So, let's we're gonna have to go now fairly soon, I think. So lots of lovely comments and questions. Addy Boy says, "Hi Peter, what is the driving style of Michael Schumacher, Mika, Raikkonen, Damon Hill, Jacques, short corner or pin perfect like Senna?" Okay, very quickly, and this will be the last one. Michael Schumacher, short corners for sure. At the standard of Charles Leclerc, at least, if not more. Probably Lewis and Max. Yeah, for sure Lewis and Max. He was that good. Mika, longer corners, not far away from Senna, but lacked Senna's ability to massage a car with understeer. By which I mean massage a car ripple free in terms of your inputs. He didn't have quite the suppleness of Senna when the car had understeer. In terms of neutrality and oversteer, I'd say he was right there. Kimi, shorter corners than Mika, and up there at his best at McLaren, I would put him alongside Leclerc at least. Very, very good. Very good feel also, sort of Sergio Perez-like feel for power application in a linear way and not disturbing the rear any more than it needs to be disturbed in terms of getting the power down. That was one of Kimi's greatest things, and wonderful foot coordination. Very little overlap between throttle and brake unless he wanted it. Damon Hill, very much more a wider entry corner driver, driving on the rear of the car. Lovely balance, lovely car control. Very like his dad, actually, in the way he drove it, in my opinion. And because of that, he could be very forceful, and he could do a lot with the car. I don't think Damon was at his best in an understeering car, but I think if he had the front planted, he was always enjoying the rear. But he always had a longer, wider corner, about as wide as Carlos Sainz. Jacques was shorter corner than Damon for sure. About like David Coulthard, who was shorter than Mika Hakkinen, very similar to Coulthard, possibly a little bit more supple than Coulthard, I think. Although David got better and better, really. He was one of the drivers that you have out there in your mind as a driver that just got better and better. I know he didn't win as much, perhaps, as he should have towards the end, but he was, in terms of a very well-rounded racing driver who could use the front end incredibly well. David Coulthard was right up there, and I think Jacques was there too. Very, very good, very supple. His idiosyncrasy was his weirdly stiff, short movement throttle pedal, which has always made me wonder a little bit about Jacques. Why he did that was kind of a weird thing. And then, of course, his very baggy overalls, which made it a nightmare for mechanics ever to get the seat comfortable for him, because there was always a new crease somewhere whenever he did the belts up tight. So there we are. Thank you so much. I say there we are. I'm just about done, and I've got to get going anyway. Thank you very much, everybody, for your kind comments, for your thoughts, and also for watching the live stream. As rough and ready as it's been. Certainly the last one was, obviously a difficult one, and then this one, we had two things: the audio when I was doing the pictures, and then we somehow lost. I don't know what happened. I really don't know what happened, but anyway, we will end it here, and just with a big thanks from Jetcraft, OEM Exclusive and TrackNinja, who make this all possible with their support of my channel. Thank you so much to those companies. And to you, the viewer, for watching and your support as well. So stay safe. I'll try and do another live stream early next week before the US Grand Prix at Austin. So look forward to that. See you there.